Madam Chair, we are ready to get started. I want to compliment the BTPAC on having quorum right at 9.
Great. So we can call to order the December 2nd Bicycle Trailways Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. And the Palm Beach County TPA is conducting the meeting both in person and virtually using the Zoom webinar platform. Instruction to join the virtual meeting as well as contact information for assistance are provided in the published meeting agenda. Staff, please call the roll so we can establish quorum.
So at this time, I will only be calling the members present in person. If you are a BTPAC representative here on behalf of a TAC, if you're a BTPAC alternate here on behalf of a TAC representative or BTPAC representative, please state your name. And as a reminder, there is a button on the base. When it's red, it means the virtual participants can hear you and the recording can pick you up. And if you can pull the microphones closer to you so we can get you on the recording. Tracy Phelps.
Present.
Bruce Rosenzweig.
Present.
Craig Pinder.
Here.
Ted Goodenough.
Here.
Joanna Peluso.
Here.
Joanne Scaria.
Here.
Fadi Nassar.
Here.
JC Berry.
Here.
David Willock.
Here.
Jean Matthews.
Here.
Yash Nagal.
Here.
Michael Owens. Ryan Harding.
Here. I'm sorry, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I'll count
Okay.
your attendance in a little bit.
Okay.
John Roach.
Here.
Larry Wallace will be absent. Brian Rusher.
Present.
Stephanie Thoburn.
Here.
We have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay. Are there any modifications to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair. So the first one is going to be regarding the virtual participation of BTPAC members. Michael Owens from the school district is still experiencing staff shortages and is unable to attend in person, as well as Ted Goodenough wasn't able to reschedule his Palm Trend Connection ride in time, and they don't allow same day rescheduling. So he asked to be present virtually as well. And they're both on the line.
Does anyone have any objections for allowing Ted and Michael Owens to participate remotely? Seeing none, we can approve that. And please note their attendance in the minutes.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And then I do have another modification. We had an error in our agenda that we provided originally under item 2C, the Atlantic Avenue widening project. Our staff omitted a sentence that was in the resolution, but not in the agenda. So the agenda is in front of you and also reposted to our website, show an underline addition just to make the two documents consistent. And then the staff presenting the item will go over the resolution in detail during their presentation.
Okay. Are there any, can we get a motion to approve the modified agenda?
This is Brian, motion to approve modified agenda.
Michael Owens, second.
So that was Brian and Michael for the second. Can I have all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
All right. And then the minutes from October 7th. Are there any changes to the minutes? No? If not, can we get a motion?
Ted, motion.
Ted,
Brian, second.
Mr. Goodenough making the motion with Brian Rusher, the second. Any discussion needed? No? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, all right. So the next item on our agenda is general comments and general public comments and public comments on agenda items. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to provide public comment to this meeting: written comments, which may be submitted online at the website provided in the agenda. Verbal comments may be made by a virtual attendee using the raise hand feature in the Zoom platform. And then verbal and written comments may be provided in person, submitting a comment card, which we have available at the welcome table in the back. Margie, are there any general comments that we've?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, then we can move on, because it looks like we might have a long one. Comments from the chair and Member comments. Let's start. Do we have any member comments? You want to go around the room? See here. Nobody? Come on, Brian. You always have something. No? No? Well, I see JC is our new regular member for Palm Beach County So I wanted to just say welcome to you. And
And I do have that Ted has his hand raised.
oh, okay, Ted, Mr. Good enough.
I just want to remind the presenters, I read through all of the presentations and a lot of times it just said graphic, which means nothing. Learn how to do alt text so that the visually impaired people who are going through your presentations. But in this case, since you don't have time to do that, please make sure you describe all of the graphics that you're going through to make sure that everyone has equal access. That's all.
Excellent point, and thank you for our regular reminder. We need that constantly, unfortunately. Okay, so if we don't have any more comments, we'll go to the BTPAC liaison report. Alyssa. We should have it on our.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many faces in person. Everyone should have a copy of the liaison report in front of you if you are here in person. If not, it is available on our website. So I'm just going to read through briefly. So the first is that on Monday, December 6th, we are having a TPA executive committee meeting. Our current executive director, Nick Uren, is resigning effective January 28th, 2022. The TPA Executive Committee will meet to recommend to the governing board a recruitment firm to administer the process of selecting a new executive director. The committee will also recommend an interim executive director. The meeting will be held on December 6th at 10 a.m., both in person and virtually. And the agenda packet and meeting details are available on our website. FDOT Strategic Intermodal System, or SIS policy plan, a public comment webinar. DOT invites everyone to participate in a live webinar presenting the draft SIS policy plan. The SIS network is Florida's high priority transportation facilities important to the state's economy and mobility. The webinar will take place on December 9th, next week at 10 a.m. and a link is available on the DOT website. And then the 2022 Safe Street Summit will be held on February 17th and 18th at the Intercontinental Hotel in downtown Miami. The theme is resilient and adaptive streets and focuses on collaborations to build regional vision or the regional vision for a safe, equitable, multimodal transportation system that adapts to the community's needs and enables a flourishing economy now and in our future. The Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7 multimodal corridor study. On December 4th, the TPA is launching its second virtual public workshop. The workshop will provide the public an opportunity to evaluate transit and roadway alternatives along both Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7, and provides feedback on how we can plan for a more efficient and safe and connected multimodal transportation corridor. More information on this is available on the Okeechobee website, which is on our website. TPA media release forms. This is just a reminder that we have not received completed media release forms from all of the committee members. This form is going to help us in creating photo and video highlights of work and accomplishments from both the committees and the board members outside of scheduled meetings. Please, if you have not yet completed this, do so. It is available on our website and needs to be emailed over to Margie once it's completed. TPA committee census update. The TPA has not received all committee member responses to its census, which collects the members' races, sex, and age. This data will also help us in tracking committee diversity in accordance with state statute. So again, if you have not completed this, please do so. It is available on our website as well. The Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board, or LCB, is still seeking members. So the LCB focuses on the needs of Palm Beach County's transportation disadvantaged population, specifically older adults, persons with disabilities, persons of low income, and children at risk. We are currently seeking a representative for children at risk, and for more information and to apply, please reach out to Kelsey Peterson on our staff. The December TPA Governing Board meeting is going to be held on December 16th at 9:30 a.m., both in person and virtually. The agenda packet and meeting details are available on our website, and the link to watch live is also available or will be available on our website. This one is up here all the time, but I'm going to remind everyone, high visibility enforcement funding is available. The next round of pedestrian bicycle HVE funding became available on July 1st. And for more information and to apply for funding, please visit the Alert Today Florida website. And then lastly, a Love to Ride Florida challenge completed the other day. FDOT hosted a statewide challenge to get more people bicycling. This challenge happened from October 29th through November 30th. During this time, 197 workplace logged over 300,000 miles for the month, which is incredible. Local organizations with multiple participants included our agency, the TPA, the Village of Palm Springs, the City of West Palm Beach, and FDOT District 4. More information is available on the lovetoride.net website as well. And that is it for me.
Margie, is there any public comment on the liaison report?
No, Madam Chair.
Does anyone from the committee have any comments or questions? Fadi.
Yeah, just a question on item number 9. Yeah, a question on item number 9, high visibility enforcement. Is this specifically related to pedestrian and bicycle? Could it be used for high crash locations?
I am going to have to, I believe it can be used for high crash locations. It is mostly geared towards pedestrian bicycle, but let me get back to you on that and just double check.
Anybody else have any questions? I have a couple questions on the release forms and the census update. Do you think you could send us some follow-up emails? Because I don't even think I saw one of them, but
Yeah, so I do send follow-up emails to the members that are missing the
Okay.
item. I don't send it a blanket one, just because if it's not related to, I don't want you to be confused and redo the form, but I do send it to those members that are missing. So following this meeting, I'll do the same again.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so that's it for that agenda item. Moving on is action item, motion to elect officers for the 2022 calendar year. So pursuant to section 5(3)(b) of the TPA operating procedures, the officers shall be elected annually at the last regularly scheduled meeting of the calendar year, and newly elected officers shall take office at the first regularly scheduled meeting of the following calendar year. Are there any public comments on this item, Margie?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. So first, I'd like to open the floor to nominations for the chair and let everyone know that I'm still willing to serve since I didn't serve the whole year this year. And are there any other nominations?
I would like to nominate you to be the chair again.
Thank you. Thank
Second.
you.
I second that as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So any other nominations? No? Okay, well, I guess,
Chair, I'm
Yes.
sorry, Fadi has his hand raised.
Just the same. Just
Okay.
Nominate you and also Brian for vice chair.
great. Yes, Brian. Okay, so we're going to close the nominations. So we have, so I guess hand a vote for, and okay, no. Open the floor. Okay, so I guess I don't have to take a vote?
Nope,
Okay.
we'll do it at the end once you pick your vice chair, and then you'll do a final motion and a second. And then a
Okay,
vote.
and, okay, so then I heard Fadi nominated Brian for vice chair. Are there any other nominations for vice chair?
And I second Brian.
Okay. Okay, so are you willing to serve?
Yes.
Okay, yay. Okay, finally, let's see what hearing no discussion. So I'm seeking a motion to elect. Is this appropriate? elect myself
Yeah, that's
as the
fine.
chair
Yes.
and Brian Rusher as the vice chair.
Yes.
Is there any discussion? And so I have a motion. Who wants to make the first motion?
I make a motion to do Stephanie as chair and Brian as vice chair.
Okay, thank you.
I second.
Okay, so Jean as first making the motion and Fadi making the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, any nays? Okay, all right, so it stays as it is, and thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay, next item. The amendment to the TPA's fiscal year 2022 to 2026 Transportation Improvement Program. And Jason is already at the podium. He's the TPA TIP coordinator, and he will be presenting this item.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be presenting amendment number 2 to the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal year 22 through 26. This is an action item that will require a vote at the end of the presentation and discussion. And this amendment number 2 is at the request of FDOT to amend one project and add a new project back into the Transportation Improvement Program. So before we get into the two projects, I just wanted to go over why a TIP amendment is needed. And there's a few different circumstances that trigger an amendment that is required. One of those is when a project is either added or deleted, which is happening here today with the second project. Next is a cost increase of more than 20% or $2 million, or there's a change in the scope, or there's a change in the project phase or initiation date, which is happening to the first project that I'll review. And as always with TIP amendments, only the projects listed in this amendment, the two projects that I'll review, are impacted by taking action today by voting on this amendment. No other project is affected in the TIP document. And so to begin with the first project, it's I-95 at PGA Boulevard. And the proposed action here is to advance this project from fiscal year 2024 to fiscal year 2022. And in doing so, you're resetting the phase initiation date, and that warrants the amendment. And the reason for this to be advanced is a new funding source has come online. It's in the funding category ARPA, and this is federal funds. It's American Rescue Plan Act funds that came online in March. And so by utilizing those funds, FDOT is able to leverage those funds for this project and advance it by a couple of years. The other project is a project that we've seen before in the draft TIP that was pulled a few months ago when we draft this particular TIP document. And that was the reasoning for that was for additional coordination between the Palm Beach TPA, Boynton Beach, and FDOT to come to some agreements on the bicycle and pedestrian facilities. There's two adjacent projects that are on both sides of this project, and there is an effort to harmonize all of the projects. And they were able to do that through their coordination and collaboration. And so that made it possible for this project to be reintroduced and incorporated back into the TIP document. And I have a few graphics here of what that harmonization looks like, what had transpired over those coordination meetings. And there's a project to the west, the resurfacing project, and in the middle is the I-95 Boynton Beach Boulevard projects that you see. And some of the characteristics of the projects are listed here too for the bike lanes and the sidewalks. So you can see that they're attempting to just create some symmetry and amongst the projects. So there's a buffered bike lane of 7 foot, and it transitions into a 5 foot bike lane or a shared use path. So those are the two projects being considered today. And if there's any questions about either of the projects, I can take them at this time.
Does anybody have any?
I have a question.
Bruce.
How fixed are these projected costs?
little closer.
How fixed are these projected costs? Have they, has the project's been bid out?
They should be pretty well fixed in terms of like anticipating a change. Ask a question again.
I said I wanted to know how fixed these projected costs are. I mean, today's one cost, tomorrow will definitely be higher.
Well, there is the potential for cost increase. And if there are cost increase beyond what is available, then they'll have to address that. I've seen that in other projects where you go out to bid and the bid price is above the programmed amount that you have available. And that is a concern, you know, that's something that you have to deal with. And I've seen that on other projects. So the projects are estimates. So when you go out to bid, they could come back higher.
They will.
Jason, one
Yes.
question. Is there usually an inflation percentage in the estimate? Okay.
Yes, there's an overhead. That's already incorporated into it, that there's overhead in as part of the project cost. But sometimes it's far beyond that. So
Yeah, I'm just curious.
there's
Curious.
Also say, mentioned too. Yeah, Jason's correct on that, but both of these projects, if you look at the timeline as well, they're already mostly through design. Like the one project, the ramp for PGA Boulevard, that's already gonna be going to construction. So the cost may increase a little bit or fluctuate for that, but for the most part, these are fairly good price costs, and they probably won't go up too much. That's maybe based on where they're at in their timeline right now. So they're getting closer to knowing the full cost of the project.
I think that's a fairly hopeful outlook on it, but in today's environment, and I'm a builder, so I have a sense of how these things will likely go. And subcontractors and material suppliers these days are placing caveats on their bids, effectively saying it's good for today.
yes,
When you sign, they'll still have a caveat that commodity costs and labor costs, if they go up, so does their contract amount. So I'm just wondering if you have enough of a contingency, either in cost, to, so that we could be confident that those costs are pretty accurate.
it is factored in. There's a standard, I think, rate for that's incorporated into it. But if it's beyond that, then I think they'll cross that bridge when it comes to that. And I've seen it in other projects. So you are correct that there is a possibility for that, but we'll just see how it pans out until costs kind of bounce back from the previous year of interruptions,
Okay.
we'll just have to deal with that.
Margie, I forgot to ask for public comment before we went
It's
to,
okay. I was gonna remind you after.
thank you.
There are no public comments, and then you also have Ted with his hand raised.
Okay, Mr. Goodenough.
Jason, first I want to thank you for sending this out to me early. I appreciate it. Gave me a chance to read through it. And my question is, you talked about a 7-foot bike path. I assume that's not in the traffic lanes, but on the road itself. And then it merges to a mixed or shared use path. How wide is that path, and why do they feel it's necessary to merge the bicycles in with people with strollers?
I think generally we're moving in the direction of getting cyclists off the roadway and onto a safer facility, separated from vehicles. And that's just been the general direction. So to create a mixed use paths kind of allows and enhances safety for everyone. It may not be the ideal conditions for all cyclists that may want to ride fast or in the roadway, but they're providing a facility that accommodates all users of all abilities. And the mixed use path is a way to accommodate that. There are some give and takes, obviously, but I think that's the general direction of creating a shared use path.
What do you think about the possibility of putting the sidewalk next to the roadway, which it's been forever? I'm 60 something and it's always been there. And then putting a greenway, maybe a foot wide, and then putting a bike path on the other side. So it's away from the street. They're safe. The people on the sidewalk are as safe as they've ever been. Why not go with that solution?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Connor Campabasso. So we've been working with both DOT and the city on this project. This originally started because the mayor took a look at the DOT project at the interchange, and he wanted to provide a little bit more space for cyclists, both on the sidewalk and also on the roadway. So that's why through the interchange of Boynton Beach Boulevard and 95, there's a 7-foot buffer bike lane, as well as a wider 8-foot sidewalk to allow for both pedestrians and cyclists to be on there. There's also other projects in this area. When it merges into the multi-use pathway, it's actually a separate project that's being done by the city. And the reason why it's a multi-use pathway in that area is because the well, one, there's not a lot of right of way in that section. And two, it's kind of transitioning into their more downtown areas. So they wanted something a little bit slower and a little bit more conducive to that. So what they decided on for that section was that multi-use pathway, and that's why it's going to be transitioning into that during that area. The multi-use pathway in that area on the north side, I believe it's 9 feet. Yeah, 9 feet, and then 15 feet on the south side. So we think that's enough space for both pedestrians and cyclists to intermingle and in a safe way. And so does the city and as well as DOT. So that's kind of where the alignments came from. If that answers your question.
Yeah, Mayor Grant and I don't agree on this. We've had several different discussions about it. I just think it's dangerous. You get a deaf mom pushing a cart, a carriage with her infant, and she's got a little 3-year-old running around in front of her. And she's not going to hear a polite bicyclist say on your left. So she's not going to know to collect her child. And a bicyclist doing 20 miles an hour, hitting a kid that weighs 40 pounds, that's some serious damage done. And the kid doesn't have a helmet. At least the bicyclist should, but it's just dangerous.
Sure. And in this segment, I mean, the speeds on the roadway are transitioning into a slower speed. So if there is a roadway, road cyclist that's trying to do 20-25 miles an hour, I mean, I think the expectation that they'd probably be still on the roadway. I think the multi-use path riders would probably be going slower than 20 miles an hour. But it is a fair point. But I think, especially in the 15-foot segment, I think there's plenty of space for the cyclists to go around, even if people are walking 3 abreast. So, but I do hear your point. Yeah,
it's just, when we do something like that, we're not considering all populations. We're not considering the deaf, hard of hearing population and the fact that they can't hear a polite cyclist who says on your left and tries to go around. And you just, in my opinion, you're looking for trouble. But I'll leave it at that.
Brian.
Yes, notwithstanding comments on design, I'd like to make a motion to approve the amended tip as presented.
Okay. Did I hear a second? Oh, no.
Ryan Harding, I second.
Okay, Ryan. Okay, so Brian made the motion. Ryan Harding makes a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Okay, unanimous. So the next item is a resolution affirming the TPA support for the Atlantic Avenue widening project from Florida's Turnpike to Jog Road. And Connor Campobasso, did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
Will be presenting this. So,
Sure.
thanks.
So good morning, everybody, again. So I'm just going to be giving a short intro to the resolution portion, and then DOT is going to be giving a full presentation on the different typical sections and everything that's going on in the corridor. So I did want to highlight the resolution and kind of give you some background on where it came from. So this project's been programmed into our TAP for a little while now, and DOT's been working on the PD&E process. And they've actually even held a public meeting. And during that same timeframe of the public meeting, they also did a presentation to our board. And the board had some concerns about different portions of the project. Specifically, they had concerns with the typical section as well as the interchange at Jog Road. So with the typical section, their major concern was they felt that a roadway with 6 lanes and speeds of 45 miles an hour wasn't really safe for road cyclists to be biking on, especially if there was no protection for them on the roadway. The comments for Jog Road was that certain intersection alignments took quite a bit of right-of-way away from both private property residential lots as well as commercial lots. It also limited access. There was concerns about bicyclist safety through the intersection, as well as pedestrian crossings and safety as well. So where this resolution came from is trying to address those concerns and essentially set a minimum spec of both pedestrian and bicyclist facilities going through the typical section, as well as eliminating any alternatives at the Jog Road intersection that would take either single family homes or limit access to businesses in the area. So we're just trying to limit that with the resolution and give DOT some direction to move forward with the PD&E study. They're eventually going to be, well, actually they'll be showing the different typical sections today, and all of those typical sections fit within the confines of that resolution. So with that, I'll pass it over to John and he'll give you that presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Connor. So my name is John Scarlatos from Scalar Consulting. I'm the assistant project manager on the consultant side, and Rudy Gottmari is here with me as well from Scalar. He's the consultant PM. We're presenting here on behalf of FDOT. So as Connor mentioned, this is for the PD&E study for Atlantic Avenue from Turnpike to Jog Road. So today we want to just give an overview and status update, discuss some of the typical sections that were previously presented to the TPA board back in June, give an update on the alternatives public workshop that was also held in June, the 28th and 29th, and then the newly developed typical sections for physically separated bicycle lanes based on the TPA board's request to evaluate. So the project is from Turnpike to Jog Road. It's approximately 1.8 miles in length in unincorporated Palm Beach County. The project incorporates widening from 4 to 6 lanes with proposed bicycle and pedestrian feature upgrades. The existing right-of-way varies from 113 to 175 feet. This is a C3C suburban commercial context classification with urban principal arterial with the posted speed limit of 45 miles per hour. So this typical section, which we are showing, is from Turnpike to Cumberland Drive. It comprises a 22-foot median, 6 travel lanes, 3 in each direction, which are 11-foot lanes with 7-foot buffered bicycle lanes on both sides of the road. There's a guardrail on the south side to protect from the canal hazard for drop-offs. And we have a 10-foot sidewalk on the south side and an 8-foot sidewalk on the north side. So this was what was originally presented for this segment. For the canal, we would be looking at having to reduce some of that canal right away anywhere between 55 and 90 feet. Lake Worth Drainage District, which owns and maintains the canal, has requested to maintain a minimum of 75 feet. With that, there's some areas where we would be looking to possibly pipe the canal. So we're working with the Lake Worth Drainage District on that. The next section is from Cumberland to Jog Road. The roadway features are the same as the previous typical section, still with a 22-foot median, 6 travel lanes comprised of 11 feet width of each. Still have the 7-foot buffered bicycle lanes, 8-foot sidewalk on the north side, and the 10-foot sidewalk on the south. The only difference here is there's no existing canal on the south side. There's just a ditch there today. So we've coordinated with the Lakeward Drainage District, and they have given us the okay to consider piping this area since we would be filling that ditch. So some of the feedback we received from the TPA board presentation was to look at wider pathways, potential shared use paths on both sides, and physically separated bicycle lanes along the corridor. So we had our public workshop held in the end of June. It was virtual on the 28th and in person on the 29th. There's a pretty long list here of comments that were received. Some people had concerns about noise, concerns for impacts to driveways on the south side where there's residential communities and so forth. And one of the key takeaways from this was the physically separated bicycle lanes that was requested by one of the commissioners. So that's why we're looking at some of these new alternatives that we'll present. So the first typical section is still similar to the ones that we had originally presented, that includes the 22-foot median, the 11-foot travel lanes in each direction. But here we have removed the on-street bicycle lanes, and we have put 12-foot shared use paths on both sides of the corridor. The 12-foot shared use path does require 4-foot clear in the front and the back of the shared use path minimum. So you'll see that in the typical section. And then we still have to maintain the widths in the canal. You'll notice we're looking at some potential right-of-way acquisition on the south side of the canal from private property with this alternative. So again, this would need to be coordinated with Lakeward Drainage District and see how much can we pipe of the canal to avoid those impacts on the south side. So the next typical section still has the same 22-foot median, 6 travel lanes. And here we have included a physically separated bicycle lane, which includes a 3-foot buffer. And within that 3-foot buffer, there is a short raised section, kind of like a curb through there, with a 6-foot bike lane. And on each side, we would also have 10-foot sidewalks. This alternative is going to be a little bit less right-of-way impacts than the previous one. We were looking at 138 feet on the previous typical, down to now 134 on this one, whereas our original one that we presented was 130. So we're looking at adding anywhere between 4 to 8 feet with these new concepts. Again, you'll see there's still some right-of-way impacts that would be on the south side of the canal, depending on what we can get approved for the width of the canal for boxing and so forth, piping the canal. And then the third option is pretty similar to what we just showed you for the first one. We still have the 22-foot median, the 6-foot or 6 travel lanes, 3 in each direction. But here we don't have the bicycle lanes as we mentioned on the first one. We have the shared use paths on both sides, which are 12 feet in width, but we have incorporated a sheet pile wall on the north side of the canal to help minimize some of that right-of-way acquisition on the south side of the canal. So this would really just reduce some of those impacts. Obviously, it's going to increase the cost in terms of the wall construction, but we'll have less right-of-way impacts associated with this. We would need to coordinate it and get approval with Lakeward Drainage District, again, to see where we can put this concept in and have to avoid doing any of the piping of the canal. So some of the challenges with these mainline typical sections that we just showed you is, additional right-of-way, obviously being the main one. Impacts of some of the privacy walls and landscape buffers on the south side of the canal, potentially impacting one of the golf courses, potential impacts to wood stork habitat, which is the canal itself, increased impacts to the Kings Point Shopping Center, and as well as parking at Walgreens, which is at the Jog Road intersection, and more impacts, residential impacts between Cumberland Drive east of Jog Road. So this graphic we're showing here is at the Eagle Point entrance, Eagle Point Drive. So just to the east of Eagle Point, you'll see we have a number of residential properties here. And we have laid out some conceptual impact lines of what these different typical sections would look like if we were to maintain the full 75 feet of right-of-way as requested by Lakewood Drainage District. In this section from Eagle Point to the east, which is to Legends Way, we are trying to work with the district to see if we can pipe this section. This is the one area which is the tightest for us in the project. We're looking at going down to 55 feet to put in the typical section. And that would be if they would approve that with piping this area. Otherwise, we'd be looking at these impacts if we have to stick with the 75 feet, which is desired. So some of the other challenges is the transition of the typical section going to the west here. We were originally with our first concept looking to thank you. So we were looking at transition at the intersection just east of on the east side of the Turnpike Bridge. Because to the west of that intersection, there's already striped out area for the 6 laning. So with that, we weren't looking to widen any of those bridges. The 2 bridges that you see on the east side of the Turnpike Bridge, we would just be doing a restriping configuration. So with these new alternatives, we would have to widen those bridges if we were to carry this through the intersection all the way to the other side of the Turnpike. So that's going to be a lot more added cost to widen those bridges. There's going to be more utility impacts if that moves forward, as well as the recently widened bridge, which is at the E2E canal to the right of the screen. That north side of the bridge was recently widened and open to construction earlier this year. So we would have to further widen that, as well as widen to the south side. Under any alternative, we would still be looking to widen the south side of the bridge, but previously we weren't looking to further increase the width of the north side since that was just recently widened. So this is an alternatives comparison that we have put together. We have a pretty long list of different evaluation categories here. I'll talk about some of the, the key takeaways is with these new alternatives, we would be improving the pedestrian and bike ped safety would be the key thing. The downfall on this is obviously going to be increased right-of-way impacts, utility impacts, environmental potentially, as well as the construction costs. So we will have some benefits and also some cons on this as well with these new alternatives. So the Jog Road intersection, as Connor mentioned a little bit before I started presenting, we talked about the different concepts here. So we had originally shown the partial displaced left turns concept. It hasn't had much support from the TPA staff as well as internally with the department, access department operations, simply because of right-of-way impacts, access issues that are associated with it, bike ped safety concerns, as well as being it's an unconventional intersection, it'll violate driver expectations. So with that, alternatives that we're looking to consider is maintaining the existing dual lefts, which there's dual left turns at all 4 approaches today, or we could expand those to have triple left turns at all of the approaches. Both of those concepts will not achieve acceptable LOS in the design year 2045. I believe the triple left turns, if we were to put that in, it would fail in the year 2026. So as far as the displaced left turn concept, that's the only one that does achieve acceptable LOS in the design year. Palm Beach County still has an interest in that concept, and we're working with them to see if we can refine it to still operate the same way, but with less right-of-way impacts. So the top concept is not necessarily off the table unless it's, excuse me, unless it takes the right-of-way as we talked about with the resolution with relocations and so forth. We would then look at discarding the concept. So this is just some of our timeline You'll notice the middle section where we have the arrow. That was the alternatives workshop that was held in the summer. And this schedule is based on what our original schedule was. You'll see we were anticipating completion in June of 2022. Now that we're looking at evaluating, new typical sections and so forth, we will have to look at extending the schedule out by maybe, 5 months or so. So we're really looking to get direction on one of these typical sections so that we can, move forward with getting approval for the project. We understand it's, very urgent, much needed project, and we want to move forward. The design is for fiscal year 2022. The consultant has already been selected, so they're on board, ready to get going on the design. Right away is funded for fiscal year 2024. Construction is currently unfunded and is a candidate project for fiscal year 2027. So Tuk Lee is the FDOT project manager. He couldn't be here with us today, but here's his contact information if you need to reach out to him for any questions. And also we have the contact for the FDOT communications manager. You can also reach out for him for questions regarding the project. And with that, we'll open it to any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Is there public comment?
No, Madam Chair, and you do have a tent card up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. I'm getting used to everybody being here in person.
I have a question about the shared use path with sheet pile wall. It seems like the shared use path is 12 feet wide, and then there's a grass buffer on either side that's 4 feet wide, which is kind of wasted space. I mean, it's between two guide rails, so is that
okay?
additional
Yes.
buffer necessary?
Yes. So as I mentioned, for FDOT criteria, in order for a shared use path to meet shared use path criteria, it has to be a width of 12 feet minimum, as well as include 4-foot clear areas on both sides of the shared use path. So that's what that 4-foot area is for.
Even behind guide rails?
Yes.
I don't know. It seems like 8 feet of wasted space.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming from the FDM. You want to?
I would like to add something to that. That 4-foot space is purposely kept as a clear distance because when the bicycles are moving, they could be 10, 15 miles per hour speed. So you don't want to have any obstruction with the guy wire or the signs and everything. So this is basically for it's a clearance distance that 4 foot. So if the bicycle is on the edge of the travel lane, there is not a sign that could, come in the way of bicyclist. So that's why FDM guidelines are provided to keep that 4-foot separation, like horizontal flat area, which is also being used as a recoverable area. Clear. So that's why that 4-foot separation on each side is recommended by FDM.
Okay, I understand. Yeah, if you have mixed traffic, kind of need some overflow space.
One thing, could you just state your name and
Yes,
affiliation for the public?
Yes, my name is Rudy Gottmare. I'm with Scalar Consulting Group, and I'm the project manager for this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But it just seemed like there was enough room to put a buffered bike lane in there. And then you wouldn't need the overflow space because you wouldn't have the combined traffic any longer.
Oh, that was one of the typical sections which had a buffered bike lane and then the sidewalk. But based on the direction from the board, TPA board, they had asked us to look into providing a multi-use pathways and remove the buffered bike lanes adjacent to travel because of the safety concern. When a bicyclist is next to the vehicle, the severity of crashes has been a lot. So that's some guidance we got from the TPA board, and that's why we came up with this more typical sections, and that's why we are here today to discuss that.
Okay.
Well, I do like that alignment, or that lesser right of way taking there. I think the green alternative that was taking people's poles and backyards out, that was kind of rough. So I was just trying to think of a way to add a buffered bike lane without going into people's backyards. So that's all.
Fadi.
What is the posted speed on Atlantic?
It's 45 miles per hour.
I know you have the two options. One is the multi-use, the shared pathway, and the other one is the buffered bike. You said you're gonna have some physical separation between.
Yes.
uh,
Yes, so that's, let me go here. So you'll notice there's the 3 11-foot travel lanes, and then next to it, there's that 3 feet. That is the buffer. So within that 3-foot buffer, there will be a little raised section within that. So that's going to serve as the physical separation, and then you'll have the 6-foot bicycle lane.
Have we implemented something similar in Florida as far as you know?
I think on a Lake Worth Road, this is being currently in design,
In
similar
design?
application, yes.
So I'm kind of curious if you have any kind of safety information, the difference between having bike on a sharing, with pedestrians, as was mentioned before, with the conflict with pedestrian versus tripping over maybe this. Do we have any kind of data to compare the safety of either option?
I don't think there's any data that I know of, but all the options that are presented are recommended in FDM, Florida Design Manual. So I'm anticipating there must have been some research and everything done. So I don't have any data about that.
Okay. Yeah, my final comment is on the displaced left. I know from kind of personal experience, when you want to show a complex kind of project, it'd be nice to have simulation with and without option A and option B, micro simulation, maybe speed it up and let people see the difference. That usually change people's opinion. So this is just my suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
Bruce.
Thanks. I have two questions. The first is, and correct me if I'm not seeing this properly, but the first section of this is from just about around the Turnpike to Cumberland, and then there's a second consideration from Cumberland to Jog. Am I correct in understanding that you're looking to go from a actual bike lane to just the shared use path east
No,
of?
no, this typical section would carry forward throughout the whole section. It just the piece from Cumberland to Jog, it doesn't have the canal. So we don't have the constraint with that. So what you saw with these typicals, let's go back. So any one of these would still have the same roadway typical section with bike ped features. It would be having the ditch would be piped in that section.
Okay.
Yeah. We focused on this just because of the right-of-way issues with the properties on the south side, and the other concept, we don't really have that issue.
Okay. In the event that it comes to having a shared use path, is there any consideration for marking those paths for maybe say 5 or 6 feet for cyclists and the balance for pedestrians?
They don't do that, right? Not at this time, not that I'm aware of, no.
Just with little thought, it seems like that may help mitigate the issue of cyclists and pedestrians walking in the same line.
Yep, understood.
Okay.
Yash.
Thank you for your presentation. So I know we talked about yesterday about putting the bus stops in there where you had gaps. And I didn't think of it till you said the roadway speed was 45. So is there enough space to put a bus bay? Because 45 is quite high. Bus bay is a bus pullout basically. So you need enough area for the bus to get out of the lane, decelerate, stop, and then accelerate, get out into the lane.
I mean, that space could be created at certain locations.
Okay.
But what I also know these days, I think, and it depends with each of these transit agencies. Some people prefer bus bays, some do not want a bus bay because once bus gets in there and then they're stuck there because the traffic's continuously flowing. So they prefer just to stop in a travel lane, and then you have a standard ADA landing pad, 8 to 10 foot wide for 50 foot long, and all that facilities for the stop to be maintained. So there is a possibility during the design, those things can be accommodated.
Okay. Yeah, we when we have posted speeds that are lesser than 45, that's what we try to do. But I think there are FDOT guidelines for, I think it gets to like 45 or 50 when you need to have a bus bay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this, as I showed you, that area that showed the property takes, that's the tightest area. So it'd probably be difficult within Eagle Point to Legends Way to put that in. But if you go just west of Eagle Point, the right of way is there's a lot more right of way availability in there. So I think there would probably be an opportunity within that section all the way to the turnpike entrance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
John?
Thank you for your presentation. Just a few comments. One is in general with regards to the resolution. I have a little bit of concern the way that it's worded in the sense that it's supporting the project as a whole. And I lead that to believe as in, if we were to approve the resolution, we support all of the alternatives that were presented here. I think you're hearing a lot of discussion about, there's some concerns with some alternatives. There may be preferences with other alternatives and so forth. And since there doesn't appear to be any prioritization or identifying of which one is of preference, approving the resolution makes it sound like we're okay with all of them. Kind of on that note, with regards to the alternatives, I think this discussion of a shared use path versus separated bike lanes versus, buffered bike lanes and so forth is coming up quite frequently across all of our projects. So I'd be intrigued, and maybe it's a separate discussion item for a future meeting, of which one genuinely is better, or are they the same and just have different, one's better for one group versus the other is better for another group, or what have you. So, I think you see some difference of opinions with regards to it. I have my own preference, that I'm kind of with Ted with regards to concern of shared use paths, especially in urban situations where you have a lot of people walking, potentially tables, chairs on the sidewalk and so forth. And then you're putting, cyclists into that, creates a lot of concern. With regards to the alternatives that were presented, I think it's unfortunate that for 2 feet of additional concrete to make it a shared use path, you lose an entire separated bike lane. I think the trade-off to that isn't necessarily fair. So that's the reason I'm not necessarily supportive of the resolution as it is, because I don't necessarily think that all of the alternatives are of equal value. And I'm curious, is there another alternative in there, a combination of between 2 and 3, for example, where you can achieve the separated bike lane, you can achieve the 10-foot sidewalk, but you can still achieve the less right of way by sheet piling the canal. So, I'm curious if there's an alternative that's not even being shown that could be explored.
So I'll comment on the excuse me. I'll comment on the resolution language for you. So this isn't necessarily supporting these typical sections. It's just directing DOT to move forward with typical sections that at least provide those standard features. So a shared use path or a sidewalk of 10 or greater feet. And if there's room for a bicycle lane in there, then proceed with that as well. The DOT is still going through the process. And in fact, they have another public meeting coming up where they're going to be showing the public and the community in that area these typical sections, but they are looking for your feedback as well. So if you do have preferred typical sections, they'd love to hear that. They're going to get comments. They've already received comments from the TAC and the CAC, and they're going to be looking for comments from the board as well. And again, from the public when they do their public hearing. So again, I just want to mention that this isn't necessarily supporting these typical sections. It's just supporting the idea that there should be a sidewalk or a shared use path of at least 10 feet in that corridor, just due to the higher speeds and the volume of traffic going through there, giving people the option to utilize that pathway. Again, open to feedback as well. So if you do have a preferred alternative, we'd love to hear about it. So,
Alyssa.
Thank you. So I do actually also want to provide a response to another part of your question, John. So per the request of the TPA governing board, we were requested to really on roadways with more than 4 lanes or more and roadways with speed limits of 35 miles or more to consider shared use paths as an alternative to having on-street bicycle facilities, with the acknowledgement that if there are different types of users on a shared use path, and let's say an instance where a cyclist bumps into a pedestrian, that pedestrian is only going to fall. if there is a cyclist on the road and there's a car that bumps into that cyclist at 45 miles an hour, that cyclist is going to be killed. So with our focus trying to be more on safety, we are trying to acknowledge that and push for that in roadway designs. So in an instance like Atlantic Ave, where it's 6 lanes and 45 miles an hour, it would be safer for users of the system to both be off the road, whereas it would be more dangerous to have anyone operate on the road.
Sure. And then after that, we'll go with Brian and then Body.
And I don't disagree with you with regards to the bicycle versus, pedestrian aspect versus comparing that to a bicycles versus car. Obviously, that's two completely different ones. I think there's some other factors. And again, I think it would be part of that separate discussion with regards to preferences or which one truly is better. There's also aspects to shared use paths where you have a cyclist on the pathway, and if there's a significant number of driveway cuts and so forth, you have cars that are coming out of developments, coming out of parking lots, coming out of wherever, that aren't necessarily anticipating a cyclist traveling 15, 20 miles an hour on a pathway, potentially coming from a direction that they're not normally associated with. When you're pulling out a driveway, you're normally looking to the traffic that's coming your direction, which would be from the left. If you have a cyclist that's, coming from the right, there's that potential collision there. So there's many aspects to the pathway versus the separated, and, there's many items of discussion that we could have there. So I'd be intrigued if we could have that in the future. I'm concerned that when it says support of the project, my concern was that you were asking us to support all the alternatives with no preference identified.
Okay. So Brian.
Thank you both for coming. Thank you both for coming. I appreciate it. What was the decision to not do a shared use 10-foot wide shared use path? Because you can go down 10 feet where there's limited right of way. What was the decision-making process with respect to that?
Per FDM.
224, yeah.
Yeah, so a shared use path does not meet FDM at 10 feet. That is a sidewalk is what that is.
I'm looking at it right now. FDM 224, 10-foot wide may be used where there's
Yeah.
limited right of way.
But
there has to have been a decision made where, there is limited right of way in some instances. I guess we are dealing with 115 to 170 feet, but you could go a little narrower if you.
The definition of limited right of ways applies when you're not purchasing any new right of way.
Okay.
Here we are widening the facility. We are acquiring right of way to accommodate travel lane as well as pedestrian facilities. So in order to, when you're buying all these right of way, you want to do a standard design.
Right.
And the definition that sometimes we read in FDM about restricted right of ways, like on a RRR projects where we are not purchasing the right of way, but we still want to accommodate some of these improvements. So in those cases, yes, if you have an existing bridge, now to widen 2 feet existing bridge when you can accommodate 10 feet. So why spend that money? So that's how that risk language is written. But on this project, we are buying significant right of way from the proposing to buy or purchase from the Lakewood Drainage District. So trying to do restrictive design, does not meet the FDM Vision Zero safety criteria, because we already just talked about those flat areas on both sides, why it's needed. It's needed because of bicyclists running off. You don't want any obstructions there. So that's why 12-foot has been found to be better. So
Thank you. That clarifies that. The next question I have, and I think it might be something you would want to maybe confer a little bit before it goes to the governing board, is with respect to maintenance. So separated bike lanes, as they've been deployed in Florida, it seems like every city and county has their learning lesson. Typically with bike lanes, the runoff from the water clears the bike lane because there's no physical separator. But when there is a separated bike lane without the right drainage and enough water and velocity created from the separated bike lane, it doesn't actually clear debris. And then street sweepers are not wide enough to get into the physically separated bike lane, because I believe the section only showed 6 foot wide, and I think you need 8 typically. And I might be wrong. I'm looking to my counterpart in the county. Maybe you know what what vehicle model you have for street sweeper, or maybe you've talked about it. But the cleaning of the bike lane would be something to consider if you do go with separated. The added maintenance cost to FDOT and to the county is something to think about, because it, without the ability to clean that that facility, it's a real nightmare. It's one of the reasons I think that DOT doesn't maintain sun trails, because they don't want to take care of extra things that they don't know how to take care of. What other decisions have been made with respect to the intersection concept? Because it seems like we basically have said, we understand that partially displaced left turn is more or less been, it sounds like, not supported for the reasons listed on here. There was, discussion about how you could improve at least some of the pedestrian and bicycle safety concerns. And I emailed Thuck Lee, the guide that FHWA has published on improving bicycle and pedestrian safety at partially displaced intersections. Is there any mechanism to improve that? I hate to say that level of service is, king, but for the time being, many of the organizations in this room still have policies around that. So, if I had to prioritize, I would say I'd rather abandon the partial displaced left turn if it's going to create substantial issues. But were any other considerations given to improving the safety of bicycle pedestrians at this intersection in particular, keeping this intersection double left or triple left?
I mean, providing refuge islands is one of those safety measures. And once this concept goes to final design, few more things could be implemented. Of course, there will be all like pedestrian movements will be all as a part of your traffic circle, timings. So there will be phase for pedestrian movement, which is all stop on one side. That way pedestrians can move. Right. Refuge islands is another one that has been implemented many times. So those kind of things could be further looked at during the final design.
It hasn't been looked at yet. Yeah, I think that's all my questions for now.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I actually had Ted, Fadi, and then Jean.
Oh,
And
okay.
Ted has had his hand raised.
Ted, I'm sorry, Ted, go ahead.
That's okay. I don't mind being ignored. No, Bruce had mentioned, marking the mixed or shared use pathway with a bicycle lane and pedestrian lane. And I believe it was you, John, who said understood. And to the end of his comment, is it under consideration?
Currently, the FDOT doesn't do it. Not to mean that it's off the table to not do it, but they're currently not doing that. So it would just have to be coordinated with the department. I'm not aware of them ever having that as a standard that it has to be implemented, but it doesn't mean that they won't do it.
Okay. How high is the buffer?
Buffer in what sense? The traffic the separated bicycle.
If you have a bicycle lane and
yeah, it's like usually it's the curb height 6 to 8 inches.
6 to 8 inches. So yeah. If the street sweeper isn't able to get the debris out, then the bicyclists are trapped. They have to stop, dismount, walk around the debris, and then get back on. Is that what? Because you can't, if you have a street racing bike, you can't jump 6 inches into traffic. You just can't do that. So I'm not a big fan of the buffered lane. I'd love to see all the bicyclists off the street. I used to bicycle all the time. I did about 7,000 to 8,000 miles a year. And I know how dangerous it can be. I was hit twice by automobiles, fortunately, neither going very fast. But, it was mentioned that an automobile and a bicycle, yeah, the cyclist is going to lose because that's a 75 to 100,000 pound impact when a vehicle's doing 45 miles an hour and a cyclist, even though it's cutting down the rate of impact because it's going in the same direction, it's the cyclist is going to lose. On the other side of that coin, back to my argument around 3-year-old at 40 pounds, 200-pound bicyclist doing 20 miles an hour, the physics of that is a 4,000-pound impact. And there's not many 40-pound kids who are going to survive that. They're going to have broken bones at least. And I had one more comment, but it's going over my head. I think, again, somebody mentioned a cyclist going the wrong way, and that car drivers or drivers are not going to look to their right for a cyclist. Well, that's kind of on the cyclist, isn't it? I mean, we know that you're supposed to go with the flow of traffic. And if you're riding a bicycle and going against the flow of traffic, you're taking your life into your hands. And I know I don't want them on the street. And I certainly don't want a cyclist in a bike lane going the wrong way, because when they hit, it's not going to be pretty. That's all.
Fadi?
Yeah, I think I'll be adding to what Yash and John mentioned. The way I see for the future, probably we're going to have electric scooters, electric bikes, and these may be important way to access your bus stops. If you go west, most of the communities are developed communities with gated community. You need some distance to access your bus stop. And if we can provide this buffered bike lane plus the 10-foot shared use, this probably way preferable than just having one multi-use path with biker, pedestrians, electric scooter, electric bike, all sharing the same one. So I think we want you to consider for the future, not just what happened today, and really look that this may be important way to access your transit bus stops. And we want to really create a multimodal system. Thank you. And again, it goes back to the safety. As long as we can ensure that those buffered bike lanes are safe, and even I think with the displaced left, there is always a way to create safe crossing for pedestrian and stuff. So I don't think it affects negatively, your alternative. You just have to show how it can be done. Thanks.
Okay, Jean.
I'm very familiar. This is a road I drive frequently, pretty much every other day or so. And I will say that the speed limit's posted 45, but the speed people travel is typically 60. There's a lot of gated communities. There's very few curb cuts. And I see that I really don't see people out walking very often there. And the people that are riding are the recreational long distance cyclists who are traveling 20, 25 miles an hour. And I walk twice a week with girlfriends at the Boca Library. It's a 12-foot multi-purpose path. And I will tell you, about 50% of the time, the bicyclists never tell us we're there. They're there. And I've almost stepped into the path 100 times and we'll say, please be courteous and just let us know. A lot of people say on your left and we'll move over, but to have somebody on that multi-purpose path and have a bicycle who's going to be a long distance, because that's who's going to use this, it's going to be, you could have collisions. And I agree with Ted. If I always worry about getting hit, and I'm big, I'm not a kid, so.
Brian?
Yeah, just one more thing, I think, before you have your comments, Stephanie. I think with respect to Gene, and maybe I asked Bruce with respect, because I know, Bruce, you're also a recreational rider. I include that in my my own, personal hobbies. The way I see this resolution going with respect to, a shared use path and 10 feet wide is that we're not planning necessarily for the recreational rider that's gonna, be going more than 15 miles per hour. I think if you're riding more than 15 miles per hour, if you're in a group, you're not going to be on the shared use path. And I mean, if anybody else, rides recreationally, they might agree. you're more than likely to take the travel lane and go into the road. And so for me, the way I look at this and the reasoning behind this and the TPA's resolution is this is for everybody else. The class 4 rider is the one who rides in the road because they're so confident in doing it, or the ones that they have to because they have no other choice. This is for the class 1 to 3, who is, everybody who is in no way, shape, or form going to bike in the road, or people who are not as confident and as strong. So with that in mind, I think the TPA's role in providing for transportation system over recreational system is very important. I think we need to remember that as we continue to move on in these types of projects. Is for what it's worth, a group of 5 to 10 recreational riders, they're going to be in the street. They're not going to take the shared use path because there's too many conflicts and there's too many driveways and too many other issues, and they'll take care of themselves. Generally those groups are pretty good about, knowing the traffic laws and whatnot. So I think that remembering who we're planning for is very important, and how they're going to use this system is important too.
Good comments. Bruce.
Yeah, I think it's a point well taken. It should be considered that cyclists or people on bicycles in general it's not a monolithic group. There are cyclists like myself who are doing the 20 to 25 miles an hour, absolutely will not be on the shared use paths. They understand that you go with the flow of traffic, you don't go against it. The casual beach cruiser rider, or that person who is using their bicycle to get to work, I'd say that the vast majority, if not almost all of them, are not aware of the fact that they should be riding in the direction of the traffic. The fact that they'd be on a shared use path would sort of suggest that they don't have to follow any rules that anybody on a vehicle in the road would have to follow. So the thought that someone pulling out of a driveway, looking to the left instinctively, not looking to the right until they're already creeping out into traffic, there's reasonable likelihood if there's, there could be a person on a bicycle coming in what you would consider the wrong direction. I think that lends some credence to my suggestion that these shared use paths be marked, if nothing else, as an educational tool. So people ultimately would say, oh, I see an arrow going in the opposite direction from the one that I'm traveling in. Maybe I should be going the other direction. Ted had said that a cyclist coming from the right against traffic, it would be on him if there's an accident. I don't know if you could pin it on somebody on a bicycle if they're not aware of what the rules of the road or of the shared use path is. So I think there should be a bit more consideration for, different types of cyclists.
Okay. Jean?
I have one more comment. If you live out on 441 and you want to go to the beach, and Atlantic and A1A is lovely, you can't get there from Linton because Linton doesn't go from 441 to the beach. Clintmore is not. When you get Clintmore and Federal, you're going to have to travel north or south to go to the beach. I'm not really sure about Woolbright. So a lot of the recreational cyclists like to cycle on A1A, which makes sense. And I think you need a way to get people from 441 to Federal Highway safely. And I think that Atlantic is the route for that. And that's why I think we need to have like facilities for the bicyclists alone.
Okay, John.
I just want to respond to a comment that Brian made, and I've ridden a lot and I ride a lot as well. And am I comfortable in riding in the roadway? Yes. And will I ride 20, 25 miles an hour? Yes. So me personally, I don't have an objection to riding in the road, but I have a feeling that the recreational riders that you're speaking of are going to ride on the pathway regardless of whether it's 10 feet or 12 feet. So the non-recreational rider or the rider who is going 15, 20, 25 miles an hour, if there is a bike lane, and I don't always ride in a group, a lot of times I ride individually. So if there is a separated bike lane for me, that is my preference because that is where I'm most comfortable. I'm not on the sidewalk. I'm not in a travel lane. I have a space that's dedicated to me. I understand there's a lot of other issues with regards to that, maintenance and so forth. But I felt like there was in that comment or in that discussion, there was an absence of the non-casual rider only having the choice of being on the shared use path or being in the travel lane. So, yeah.
Tracy, I see you down there.
Yes, I'm be short here, brief. I just want to applaud you for trying some new different type of concepts. My experience of partial displaced left turns is that they do work. And it's nice to be trying some new different concepts instead of the same old double and triple left turn lanes. Dual left turn lanes, you don't get twice the capacity. You have something like 1.67 or something. And triple left turn lanes, you get something like 2.3% more capacity. So I'm sick and tired of seeing these same type of intersections opening up. When they open up, they're already at capacity and over capacity within 6 months after they open. So it's nice to see something new. I think there is one other one of these in Florida. There might be more. I know there's one in Lee County. Have you looked out at, I think it's State Road 84 in Lee County as either a partial or a full displaced left turn intersection? Have you looked at that intersection any? And
Yeah, you're correct. These type of intersections are being more and more explored and implemented. I think there are some on the West Coast. They're also currently either in construction or partially displaced or fully displaced left turns. They're currently being built. So you're correct. These are new concepts. It's something new that we all have to get used to eventually, I think, maybe just to make the traffic work, because we are trying to accommodate everything within the same right of way we have without impacting adjacent properties, businesses. So this is like a best case scenario, what we can do to accommodate everything. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
yeah, and it's nice to hear the Palm Beach counties at least trying, looking into it. I understand the right of way cost and the access. Walgreens I've dealt with them for years on access issues throughout the state. So I know how they are. But and look, this intersection, I really don't, you're shortening some of the crossing distances with the islands for pedestrians. That's an improvement. And actually that's an improvement on the intersection because that's reducing the flashing don't walk time. I really don't see too many safety concerns for pedestrians that's different from a regular intersection with this design. So it's small. Really, you can't get too detailed of a look at it, but just from what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing really anything worse than a normal intersection. Actually, if you do the triple left turns, it's going to make a longer crossing and take more time away, more time used for flashing don't walk and make the intersection worse. So I applaud you trying these new concepts. There's a lot of new different concepts out there. Yes, it will violate drivers' expectations, but we violate drivers' expectations every day. If you don't get a green light through 10 traffic signals, we're violating a driver's expectation down here. So we do our best, and we just got to try these new things so they can. So drivers can expect these new, it can become commonplace. So I'm just applaud you for trying this. And again, glad that Palm Beach County's on board with you, at least to see if it will work. I understand the right of way cost and the access issues, and it may not work, but glad to see that we're trying out new concepts down here in South Florida instead of the same old tried and true double, triple left turn lanes and that really fail once they're open.
Okay, Fadi?
Yeah, two quick comment. I think for maintaining, a buffered bike lane, I think once we build them, I'm sure the county will find a way to do it. Doesn't have to be a sweeper, maybe something different, but I'm sure we'll find a way to do it. The other one is basically, there is a correlation between congestion and safety and crashes. So if an alternative works better and you can prove that operationally that this alternative works better, by definition, it's safer. So we hope that you can, emphasize all the benefit of having an improved operation at an intersection, even if the design is a little bit different than what we used to. I mean, initially nobody wanted to have, a lagging left turn, but now we have it all over the place. They're DDI now they're building them, they're proposing them several places. So as long as things improve, people will get used to it. The same thing with flashing yellow arrow. Thanks.
Okay. Is that everybody? Okay. I just want to make sure we had a lot of really good comments and a lot of variety. Was there something you wanted to talk about, Jean? Okay. And a lot of variety in the comments, and I appreciate all that. I think the goal here that, as we sit as the committee is balance, because we have to balance what our charge is safety for pedestrians and bicyclists with progression of the vehicles and how we do that and promote multimodal solutions for the most amount of people is really something that we have to not only balance, but compromise over. So we have to think about how are we going to get the most amount of people to get out of their cars. And trust me, I'm one of them. I like to sit in my car because I have to drop off kids and make errands and do all these things. But one of the things that really made sense to me was not only getting out and riding your bike or walking, but when we did that bike walk audit with Alyssa and her group, and we did it on Indiantown Road, which is very similar to the road that we're talking about today, Atlantic. It is 50 miles per hour. Being context sensitive to what it is, having the driveways and understanding how do you get people out of their cars to help reduce the congestion is really, how do you make people comfortable? And my personal opinion, after doing those types of things, riding bikes, doing the bike walk audit, is to get the most amount of people is to do a shared use path, because that's going to accommodate the most amount of people, the young kids, the little kids, and having a striped or some sort of demarcation on that 12-foot wide path, which is wider than a travel lane that a vehicle drives on, is something they do all along. They do it in Europe. So I don't see why we can't do a 12-foot wide shared use path with demarcations for pedestrians and bicyclists to take care of the people who are going slower, who have the strollers, who are disabled, which makes perfect sense. So I think that is a nice compromise, and how, we can look to others. I think other solutions, Tracy, I appreciate your opinion, but I think, on new ideas, but I think also looking towards old ideas that work, like going back to a grid, creating cross access. And I brought this up last time about that dual left turn, whatever that crazy thing is that isn't supported, thank goodness, because it not only blows out the intersection, but if you simply make cross access and create that grid on the backside of that intersection, then not everybody's going to go that way. And we do this in Jupiter. We put it in our comprehensive plan to do traffic mitigation throughout our intersections to create cross access. So it doesn't just fall on FDOT and the county to resolve our traffic progression for vehicles. It is a multi-layered solution that is shared by everyone and all the planners. I mean, we should be requiring that. Even if it's not in our comp plan, we should be asking for those things. Cross access, public cross access through, and you wait, I've done it. I've waited 20 years to get cross access through properties, but dadgummit, that drive gets built to the property line. And then when that next guy comes in, you get it from them. And guess what? We got access to that light. That's how we do it, because that's an old way of doing it. That should be new again. So, you know, if we can think about those kinds of things, I think we'd be better off, but it's going to take all these little solutions as well as the big ideas to make it happen. So I appreciate everybody's comments and all the discussion because it's fun. And I hope you really listen to us because, you know, adding some of these suggestions like the striping on the shared use path, trying to get the most out of this road and not just through vehicles, but through people walking, bicycling. And remember, we have new rules on bicycles. So these electric bikes are bikes. So, you know, putting in that stripe or that demarcation, you know, they're going to go 25 miles per hour. Some of them go 40. So we need to make that space for each other on a 12-foot wide shared use path. We can do it. So thank you. And if with that, if we can get a motion from somebody, I'd appreciate it.
This is Brian.
I just want to say I agree with you. I'm a big proponent of cross access, and I used to require that all the time. And when I worked with Seminole County, the cross access is great, and everybody should be doing it. We should be eliminating access as part of access management with on DOT roads, county roads, and city roads. I wish we had something like you're doing in Jupiter and the city of Boca, because eliminating access points and cross access is definitely one of the greatest old ideas out there.
Right.
Motion to recommend adoption of a resolution affirming TPA support for the widening of Atlantic Avenue widening project from Florida Turnpike to Jog Road.
Do I have a second?
Motion to recommend adoption of the resolution as presented.
Motion presented by Brian. Do I have a second?
Second.
And then, Madam
Second.
Chair, I do have Ted and John with their 10th cards.
Okay, so for discussion, Mr. Goodenough.
I just wanted to ask if in your plans, when you're talking about the intersections that have lights, are you considering putting in audible cross lights? Because a walk, don't walk sign for me doesn't exist.
Yes, that would be incorporated into the design. So in the PD&E phase, that type of detail isn't shown, but in the design that would be included.
Okay. Do we have more discussion on the motion that's on the table?
Yes.
John
And Bruce.
and then Bruce.
Thank you. Just for reasons discussed previously and the way the resolution's worded in the support of the project and no delineation of, you know, any of the concerns that have been discussed here, preferences or what have you, I'm probably going to vote against the motion, but that shouldn't be construed as I don't support the need for improvements along this corridor, and that some of these alternatives are viable solutions that I could support, but the way it's worded, I do have concerns.
Madam Chair, if I may, you do have the option to modify the resolution language. So if you do have a suggestion, you can do that as well.
Understood. The motion was made as worded, so.
Okay.
John, for discussion, what's your recommended language?
Maker of the motion, ask for an amendment.
I think the resolution could potentially add language with regards to the committee's preference in terms of not just an 8-foot or excuse me, a 10-foot, be a minimum of 10 feet in width, but you know, which alternatives we actually support in terms of the shared use path versus the separated, you know, is it 1, 2, and 3, you know, in the order in which they're presented? Do we have a preference, even one over the other? I think the way it's just, all it states now is that we support the project. That sounds inclusive. And that it just needs to meet A, B, and C. One is that it be a sidewalk or shared use path of a minimum of 10 feet. Well, they all meet that requirement. All the alternatives do. And so forth. So, and I do have concerns with regards to the one that eliminated the separated bike lane completely from the project and, you know, provided the 10, or excuse me, the 12-foot shared use path. So yeah, I think it could be worded to indicate some type of preference of the committee with regards to the bicycle facility specifically.
Understand.
So I'm not sure if this
Madam-
motion exclude the bike lane or not.
Well, from reading it, it's just general support of the project. Is that correct, Alyssa?
Do you want me to answer that? Sure. Yeah. So the way this resolution is worded, any of those typical sections that were shown today, including the one with the bike lane, are included in that. So it's not precluding a bike lane from existing.
But also includes the one without the bike lane.
Excuse me. You are correct. Yes.
Bruce?
That was sort of going to be my point. In the resolution, it doesn't mention anything about bike lanes separated, buffered, or whatever. And insofar as it's specific about the points that are made in the resolution, it's to the exclusion of a lot of what we've been discussing with about bike lanes. So if we're going to approve this in general, in theory, as yes, we support improvements, I don't know that we can limit it to, it suggests possibly that it's limited to this, to these 3 points.
For the TPA and for the project consultant, for the purposes of this study, providing sidewalks and a separated bicycle lane is feasible, but it would come at a substantial cost, correct?
So you're saying bicycle lanes, on-street bicycle lanes and a sidewalk,
Separated bicycle lanes and a sidewalk, yes.
which was one of the alternatives that we had showed. So that would, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, is that, yeah, this one right here you're talking about? Yep, so that is an option. So just to be clear, the resolution means that if that gets adopted, we can move forward with anything that we just presented today out of these 3 typical sections. So we would like to get the guidance so that we don't come back several months from now, go to a public hearing, present a typical section, and then someone says, well, we didn't want this, or this, we wanted this one.
So the motion on the table is all of the alternatives and just supporting the project. Just to be clear.
Correct. It's essentially guiding DOT to at least incorporate a minimum spec of 10 feet of sidewalk. But that includes all these typical sections that they should have.
And to get everybody's comments, which we've been doing and all of the other advisory committees have been doing. I'm not sure if the maker of the motion, or maybe we should just see how it goes. And if it fails, then we would need to, because there's lack of specificity in the resolution of whether or not a separate motion needs to be made. Okay.
John, do you have additional comments? No, oh, thank you. It's okay.
Fadi, did I hear?
I mean, since this option is included, so I mean, personally, I'm fine with the motion.
Everything that's discussed here is a matter of record.
Yes.
Okay.
is generally spoken about in the minutes, so. Are we ready for,
Would you prefer to do this one by roll call vote?
yes, please.
Okay. So Ted and Michael, just remember to unmute yourselves when I call your name. Tracy Phelps,
Yes.
Bruce Rosenzweig,
Yes.
Craig Pinder,
Yes.
Ted Goodenough,
No.
Joanna Paluso,
Yes.
Joanne Scaria,
Yes.
Fadi Nassar,
Yes.
J.C. Berry,
Yes.
David Willock,
Yes.
Jean Matthews,
Yes.
Yash Nagal,
Yes.
Michael Owens,
Yes.
Ryan Harding,
Yes.
John Roach,
No.
Brian Rusher, Stephanie Thoburn.
Yes.
So it passes with 2 opposed. I have John Roach and Ted Goodenough as opposed.
Okay. Good job, everybody. All right, next item. I think we're on informational items. Yes, so the Palm Tran Major Transit Development Plan update, and Palm Tran staff and consultants are here to present this item, including my old, not old, because we're not old, I'm sorry. My Jill Quigley and I used to work together a while ago.
Good morning, Anna Bielawska, Senior Transit with Palm Tran. We are excited to present Accelerate 2031, which is Palm Tran's major transit development update. This is our strategic vision for transit services in Palm Beach County for the next 10 years. Jill Quigley from Tyndale will be presenting the item this morning.
Thank you, Anna. I had to bring my glasses, so to me, that means I'm getting old. So good morning, everybody. So today I'm just going to go over the TDP background and process, give you a summary of the public outreach, the 10-year transit needs that were identified and evaluated, the 10-year plan, and then talk about next steps. So what is a transit development plan, or TDP? For those of you who don't know, as Anna mentioned, it's a 10-year strategic plan for transit. It follows the basic planning process where we evaluate existing conditions, identify needs, identify alternatives, evaluate those alternatives, and then take it a step further by looking at funding. And as Anna mentioned, it's updated every 5 years, but in between, on an annual basis, Palm Tran does an annual progress report. So they also update it every year, just not this major update that we have done this time. And the TDP is a requirement for FDOT. It is how Palm Tran gets their block grant money from FDOT. So it's a very critical part of their process. But it's important, even though I've talked about funding and unfunded, the TDP is not a budget. So it doesn't bind Palm Tran to following it. It's not an agreement. They can change it as circumstances change. So this graphic just basically kind of illustrates what I just described about identifying needs, defining solutions, and setting a vision. The important thing to note here is that this document is guidance for the entire agency. So not just for the planning department, but for development operations, as well as maintenance. And we had a very short time frame with this TDP, and we started our public outreach in the summer, unfortunately, at the same time that the Delta variant was taking off. So Palm Tran decided, in an abundance of caution, that we were going to do all of our outreach virtually. We were excited that we were able to engage still over 12,000 people through this virtual outreach. And I wanted to mention that we were very fortunate to have a steering committee that helped with the TDP process. It included Fadi from Palm Beach County Engineering. He kept us on our toes, as well as a representative from FDOT, the Palm Tran Service Board, the TPA, and the Career Source of Palm Beach County. So the next 2 slides are going to review the online transit survey that we did. We had over 754 responses to this, and all of our surveys and outreach were framed around 3 themes. Where are we today? Where are we going? And how do we get there? So this slide focuses on the where are we today part of the survey.
And it shows that more than 85% of our respondents said that they had used Palm Tran services in the past, and 40% of them said that they used it frequently or daily prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's good that we got a good representation of Palm Tran users in our survey. We also asked them the top 3 reasons that they do ride Palm Tran, and you can see 62% say they ride it because they do not have a car, 12% ride it to save money, and 9% believe that it is safer than driving. The survey was structured for both riders and non-riders, so we asked the people who do not ride Palm Tran why they don't ride it. And you can see 48% said that it takes longer than driving. 40% said that there's not a bus stop near them to enable them to take it. And 37% said it was difficult for them to get to the bus stop. So now we move on to the where are we going? And you can see here that over 2/3 of our respondents definitely agreed that transit is going to be very important to the future of Palm Beach County, both because of the growing population and the congestion that that creates, as well as the aging of the population and needing to provide options for people who may no longer be able to drive. We also asked them what could be done to help improve ridership on Palm Tran, and 60% said to improve the frequency of the service, so have bus come more often. 58% said to provide regional express or commuter service, and then 55% said more weekend service. Then the last part was, how do we get there? We had questions about a local funding source. We didn't define specific funding sources. We just asked if there would be support for a dedicated funding source for transit. And you can see 64% of the people who took our survey said they would support that. 67% said that they would need some additional information to help them support it. But generally speaking, there's good support for transit funding in Palm Beach County. So a key component of the TDP is the situation appraisal. And this looks at all the information and data collection that was done in the early stages and looks at what are the implications of that for transit. And so this graphic, the colored part of the circle, shows those different factors that are evaluated: socioeconomic trends, travel trends, land use. There's an organizational assessment, technology and innovation, government policy, funding, and community feedback. And now the text boxes that are around the outside, those are the implications for transit that we identified in each of those areas. And you'll notice that in several of those text boxes, improvements to the core network was a result of that evaluation. I also wanted to point out that one of the important things for Palm Tran is trying to rebuild ridership post-COVID. So these next 2 slides are going to summarize the 10-year needs, and this first slide starts with the service needs. It's important to note that Palm Tran already had identified many of these needs through their ongoing efforts. So for the TDP, $10 took them and organized them, and in the plan helped phase them and provide funding for them. So you can see, and it was repeated in our survey, the need for regional express service. There's planned service from Port St. Lucie to West Palm Beach, increasing the frequency on the core network routes, which overlap with the 561 plan routes, looking to improve that headway to 15 minutes. And then also the Go Glades service out in Belle Glade in the western portion of the county has been really popular. So Palm Tran had already started looking at expanding that service to other areas of the county. Then some additional needs were other capital and infrastructure needs, policy needs, technology needs, and then plans and studies. And you'll notice under plans and studies, the first thing in there is the next major TDP update for the fiscal year 2027 to 2036. For this group, I thought it would be important to point out the bus stop infrastructure and accessibility improvements that are under the other capital and infrastructure needs. This is looking at adding shelters and benches to bus stops and also ensuring that all bus stops are accessible, have an ADA accessible path to get to the bus stop. There's also an electrification master plan under the technology needs that Palm Tran will be looking into over the next few years. So this slide summarizes our evaluation process. On the left-hand side, lists the things that we use to identify the needs, the operating environment, public involvement, transit demand assessment, which goes through the project review committee and the situation appraisal to come up with the list of needs we've just shared. And then it goes through an evaluation process that has 4 criteria: public support, ridership potential, connectivity, and financial feasibility. And out of that comes the priority ranking for the improvements, which you can see are listed on the right. Sunday service span improvements came out number 1, followed by regional express service, west-east connectivity, and so on. So now I know these are very difficult to read, and I'm not going to go through them at length, but so this is the table that shows the 10-year service plan improvements. And if you notice up in the top part, you can see that's pretty much predominated with the 561 core network route frequency improvements. And then in the bottom, you can see there's that mobility on demand, the pilot projects to be implemented. And so this table shows the implementation year, the projected annual operating costs, where the funding is coming from, the projected capital costs needed for it, and where the capital costs are coming from. And then this next table summarizes those other areas for plans, capital infrastructure, and technology improvements. And so here you can see in the other capital section, the bus stop improvements that are slated for the year 2022, 2024. And again, if there's operating costs, those are summarized here along with capital cost and the funding sources for those. So these next 2 slides summarize the financial component of the plan. This one shows the operating side. And you can see that over the 10 years of the plan, the operating costs are expected to be $1.4 billion. Revenue is expected to be 1.3. And so that leaves us with an unfunded amount of 127 million over the life of the 10-year plan. And for the graph itself, the blue lines, the light blue, shows the total operating expense, right? So that's the total we need. The orange shows the available revenue. And then that purple section shows where there's a gap. And so you can see the gap gets wider towards the last few years of the plan. And the hope is that by the time of the next major update in fiscal year 26, 27, we will have identified other funding sources that will help reduce that shortfall. This slide shows a summary for the capital cost. The 10-year total for capital cost is 209 million. The available revenue is 190.2 million. And so it's a much smaller unfunded gap compared to operating expenses of 18.8. And this graph is the same. The blue lines show the total, green shows what's available, and then the purple shows the gap. And so with that, the TDP needs to go to the Board of County Commissioners for approval. And once they approve it, it will be submitted to DOT by the end of November. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks. Is there any public comments on this informational item?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do we have any committee comments? Oh. David.
I was wondering, most of your revenue is gas tax, right?
I don't, if someone from Palm Train can help me answer that.
It is, but I'm kind of wondering, do you take into account the fact that there's going to be more and more electric vehicles, and you're going to have, ever decreasing revenue as that comes into play?
Are you asking about Palm Trend revenue?
Yeah, well, yeah, it comes, a lot of it, if not most of it, comes from gas tax,
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
We don't have an answer to that, but that's a good point. I think that's one of those problems that we'll have to deal with as we go towards electrification. We're planning for electrification at Palm Trend. I think our first bus is supposed to be 2025, but I think as we get to that point, we're gonna have to work that out on how we get the whatever's the the left out part.
You're kind of assuming like the revenue to remain kind of level though, right? I mean,
In terms of this, what you just saw?
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I think that could be a problem in the future. I mean, there's so many automakers that are saying within 10, 15 years are going to go to pure electric vehicles. So I don't know, it's just something I think should be taken into account.
Okay. Jean?
What is transit signal priority?
So that basically means that the bus, when it gets to the intersection, gets an extended green. So everything is stuck in traffic. Yeah, the bus gets to the intersection, and the intersection is gonna allow like 5 seconds, 4 seconds more for the bus to pass by.
Oh,
So
that's
the
nice.
intersection can sense the bus is coming.
That's nice. So if you ride the bus, it actually could be faster possibly.
Yes, that's what our goal is. So basically the entire running time becomes less because you're passing through signals faster.
Okay. And then the other, what transportation on demand? Because it always seems to me that maybe that some areas could benefit from smaller, like 12-person passenger vans than a huge bus. And one last question. With the electric buses, when you consider the capital outlay and operating costs and maintenance, are they cheaper than the diesel buses you have now?
We don't know that yet because there's a
Okay.
lot that goes into maintaining the electric bus. We're gonna have to get new technicians, and a lot of that cost has not been predicted yet. And did you have a question on mobility on demand?
Yeah, can you describe that?
Sure. So mobility on demand basically works on the concept that there's a zone, and in the zone, you can order it when you want to actually ride it versus a fixed route that's going to come on a schedule. We right now have that service in the Glades region. It's called Go Glades. Actually, that was pretty much the only service that in COVID was going up in ridership versus the other ones. So our plan as you saw in the TDP, there were multiple zones. Our plan is to expand the Go Glades model and maybe try it out in other sections of the county that have lower density.
The last question is, when a person pays to ride the bus, which is a good thing to be able to ride a bus to get to a job, do you have a percentage of what that bus ticket actually pays for in terms of the ride provided?
You mean what percentage of that goes into the operating?
Like, does each bus ride cost $9 and a passenger pays $2 or that kind of thing?
That's what our fare box ratio is. I don't remember what it is right now. Anna, do you remember?
I think it's like 22% or something. Oh, okay.
It's usually 20-some%, but because of COVID, it's been a lot less.
Well, and without buses, people wouldn't be able to get to work. So then they'd be on public assistance. So it's good we have the buses.
Yeah.
Okay. Joanna, I see you back there.
Yeah, thanks so much for the information. I have a question, and this is kind of speaking from personal experience and personal observations, but from the pedestrian perspective, and I live in Jupiter and I have a bus stop right outside my apartment complex, but and I think it's going north. So to get to the community, people are crossing or to get to the community they need to from the bus stop. They're crossing. They're not going to go all the way to the intersection. That's probably half a mile away. They're going to cross at an unmarked crosswalk. So I was just curious in the plan or the study that you all did or future plans, if there's anything to kind of identify that issue of pedestrians accessing neighborhoods, resources, services, shopping centers that are, across several lanes of traffic.
Absolutely. I think you bring up an excellent point. So one of the things that was in there was bus stop improvements. And we actually have our consultant team coming in the next 2 months to do an on-field assessment of all 3,000 bus stops. And those are the things they're going to be looking at and providing their feedback on where we need to move the stops, or we need to eliminate the stops, and how to make them safer.
So Yash, maybe you should give him Joanna's phone number.
Yes, absolutely.
That's my just one point of recommendation for that would be like, let's ask the community members where they're trying to go.
Yeah,
as part of
absolutely.
that,
There's a
right?
public
Which is
outreach
perfect.
component.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tracy.
On some of the express routes on I-95, have you looked into buses on shoulders during peak hours?
We have not looked at that. The express routes that are proposed on 95 would just be in the regular lane right now. But that's a good point.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else?
You have Ted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ted, I need a Ted button.
I'm just wondering, is Palm Trend Connection under your umbrella?
Is it under Palm Trend? Yes. I mean, Palm
Okay.
Trend's divided into two parts, which is one is fixed route, the other one is Palm Trend Connection, which is the
Okay.
paratransit piece.
I know that they're struggling with getting drivers, that the drivers are going off to Amazon and other places, which is costing the riders hours of travel time. Are you having the same problem with fixed route?
Unfortunately, yes, that problem is very universal. Not only in transit, people everywhere right now are kind of quitting jobs a lot. And it has become really troublesome to maintain the level of service that we have. We were actually one of the first transit agencies that came back to full service after COVID. And we had to do a lot of optimization in-house with the scheduling system to actually keep that level of service on the street. Because the other option was we would have to go back to a Saturday level of service, which I believe is significantly lower than our weekday levels.
Yeah, I live in West Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, and I work in Boynton Beach. And the other day I spent 3.5 hours trying to get home. And, you know, that for me, and I didn't hear a whole lot about paratransit in the presentation. And I'm wondering what the plans are to help out those who are unable to drive. I'm blind, so you don't want me driving. Otherwise, I'd get a job on your buses. But
So unfortunately, a lot of the TDP is focused on the fixed route system. That's why you didn't see a lot of paratransit improvements and everything in there. I can't answer from a paratransit perspective because I'm not there. I'm not working day to day in the system. But I can get you a contact. We can follow up with you after the presentation.
no,
to answer some of the questions.
I do have a contact at Palm Trend Connection, and unfortunately, a lot of pat answers. Lou, the operations manager, you know, if you call him or email him, you get pat answers like, well, it's a shared ride. And, you know, you have to expect that it's going to take a long time, but it's, you know, they've stopped social distancing. We still have to wear a mask, which I'm thankful for. It's just, you know, you get on the bus, and I get on the bus at about, well, my window is 1:30 to 2, and then we go and pick up 3 or 4 students, and then we drop them off over near Forest Hill Drive and Wellington. And you've already passed my street when you do that. And I understand we need to get the kids home safely. I just think that somebody needs to look into their routing system, because it's not working. That's all. I won't yell at you anymore.
Thanks, Ted. Oh,
I'm sorry.
go
I
ahead,
just,
Jill.
I know you have a TPA staff member who wants to respond, but I just wanted to tell Ted, we did do a discussion group specifically with connection writers for an hour and a half, and they gave us a lot of good information, and all of that is documented and has been shared with Palm Tran. So we are aware of the variety of issues going on with connection.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kelsey Peterson. I'm a transportation planner here at the TPA and the liaison for our Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board. Ted, I just wanted to let you know that for the LCB, we have a transportation disadvantaged service plan. We just completed a minor update to the plan, but we'll be doing a major update next year. So that'll be focused on the paratransit side. And if you'd like to be involved, I can reach out to you and we can make sure that you're involved in that process next year.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bobby.
Yeah, just want to make general comment. I mean, for me, it was kind of a pleasure to participate in the process and provide some feedback. And I was really impressed by the quality of the work being done and how reasonable the assumption and how well supported they were. So just a comment.
Anybody else? I just had one comment. I thought that the 15-minute headway times as a priority was like the most important thing. Because I did the survey that came out, and so it took a while, but I took the time and did it. And that is, for some of us who don't necessarily use the bus as much as we should, that's the number one issue. So 15-minute headway times is on fixed routes are really important. And I can see that, especially if you rely on them for your livelihood. So thank you, Jill. Nice seeing you.
Nice to see you.
And thank you, Fadi. Thank you, Nat, Yash. I'm sorry we didn't introduce yourself as the next presenter, but it was a nice surprise. So next item, informational item, is the Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7 multimodal corridor study update. And Jessica, Jocelyn, and Stuart Robertson, TPA consultants, will be presenting this item. Welcome.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. Again, I'm Jessica Jocelyn with Kittleson Associates, presenting this important corridor study update with my team partner, Stuart Robertson at Kimley Horn. So this corridor study has been going on since the spring of this year. So it's been a little while since you've heard from us. So we wanted to come back and give you an update on the analysis findings and actually a set of potential alternatives for the Okeechobee and State Road 7 corridor. So we look forward to your comments and questions at the end of the overview. So just as a reminder, given it has been a little bit of time, the study purpose of this corridor study is really focused on enhancing transit service from the mall in Wellington to downtown West Palm, and also looking at how to improve the pedestrian and bicycle facilities that would support that transit system. And ultimately, the goal here is in alignment with your 561 plan to create more transportation options throughout the county and create a safe, efficient, and connected system. The study limits are, again, the Wellington Mall on State Road 7, traveling north to Okeechobee, and then heading east into downtown West Palm. We do have a graphic here that shows the number of residents, households, and jobs in the corridor. This information is important because it does show a high number of residents and jobs. 42,000 residents are listed and 46,000 jobs. So we see this as a productive corridor to look at enhancing transit to provide more, again, opportunities for folks living and working in the area to have different options than their car. And I will pass it to Stuart that's going to walk through some data findings along with me.
Thank you very much, Jess. From the purpose standpoint, one of two primary purposes from a transportation perspective is multimodal safety and trying to enhance multimodal safety. Crash data for the Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7 corridor show that multimodal safety is an important issue that needs to be worked on and addressed immediately based on our current data. The heat map that is shown on this slide is from the TPA's Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Study, which show that in particular, the portion of the corridor between the Turnpike and roughly Congress Avenue is one of the worst locations in the county for pedestrian crashes and fatalities. TPA's Vision Zero plan found a similar result. And also we have reviewed even more recent crash data from an online tool called Signal 4 Analytics, which shows that pedestrian crashes and fatalities continue to be a concern. We've had 12 fatalities in the corridor in the most recent 5 years of data. And it's actually one of the few corridors in Palm Beach County that has more bicyclist crashes than pedestrian crashes, although the bicyclist crashes tend to be more spread out, whereas the pedestrian crashes tend to focus in that center portion of the corridor. From the transit standpoint, there are two transit hubs at either end of the study corridor, the mall at Wellington Green and the Intermodal Transit Center. We were able to take a lot of our existing conditions information from a report that PalmTran published in January 2021 an existing conditions assessment of the Okeechobee Boulevard and State Road 7 corridor. Route 43 is the West Palm Beach crosstown route, which is the route that most closely mimics the corridor study area, although not exactly. There are some portions of Okeechobee Boulevard that don't currently have service, but Route 43 is one of the most productive routes in Palm Trans fixed route system. Headways were recently updated to 20 minutes on Route 43.
And now I'm going to go over health and social vulnerability assessment that we did. So this is an important component of our study where we're trying to, as best we can, integrate the health component and understanding and communicating with the public and everyone involved that the transportation decisions we make can potentially impact the health of communities. So we pulled data to show where we have the poorest health conditions within the study area: asthma, heart disease, cancer, things of that nature. So we found those areas that are having the most conditions, if you will, are east of the Turnpike into downtown West Palm. And then we also looked at using that information, overlaying it with additional information such as housing and transportation costs, race, ethnicity and language, social economic status and household composition. We overlaid that information to develop an assessment of where we need to consider the most vulnerability of our populations. So again, as we're making transportation decisions, and Stuart's going to walk through the alternatives, that we're considering these areas in darker blue, which again are mostly east of the Turnpike along Okeechobee, that we're not negatively impacting them with our transportation choices, and that we're taking that into consideration. So the next slide is the study components. I walk through with Stuart some of these, such as the transit analysis and roadway analysis and health impact already. But I also wanted to note an important component of this study is the land use and economic development component, where we are working with developers and municipalities and the county to look at how we can reimagine the land use around the transit choices. And I'm going to walk through a couple slides later in the presentation about that. But I also want to highlight here another important study component, the public and stakeholder engagement. We've been doing key stakeholder interviews throughout the study. We have a few working groups, a technical steering committee, a health impact assessment working group, and a land use and economic development working group. And we also have workshops that we have done and will be doing. So today I just wanted to go over the first public workshop. It kicked off August 19th in person. We had about 40 people that attended following COVID safety protocol. And in order to engage more of the community and get more feedback, we also went online and had a virtual workshop all the way through November 12th. So Melissa, Cassidy, and James kind of boots on the ground, got out there and got the word to get people to the virtual workshop. And we had over 1,300 workshop views, many repeat visitors to the workshop online, which was great to see. We also had several people provide input in our survey and on our interactive comment map. So lots of great feedback we received throughout this period to learn about what people found are most important to them, the issues and opportunities. And these were the top 3 priorities. The first one, congestion relief; the second, health and safety; and the third being mobility choices. So it was really great to see the nice synergy and alignment of what we suspected would be of top priority to the community and what we were already planning to do throughout the study.
And you may find it not to be a surprise that congestion relief scored very highly in the public survey, because this corridor handles a very high volume of people moving in cars. A baseline traffic inventory was conducted consistent with the typical level of detail that you would find in a transit alternatives analysis phase using segment-based level of service. The base traffic volumes in the corridor range from approximately 40,000 or so on State Road 7 in the lightest portion between Belvedere and Okeechobee, and it just goes up from there the further south you go on State Road 7. On I-95, or east of I-95, the corridor carries approximately 77,000 cars a day in that segment between Okeechobee and Tamarind. And the volumes are only projected to increase from there. In the 2045 long-range transportation plan, the cost feasible plan model projects the volumes will rise to between 52,000 and 84,000 in a typical day, with several segments in the 2045 horizon year operating at level service F if we don't make some sort of transportation intervention in the capacity of the roadway. Goals and objectives were established at the beginning of the project, working together with TPA staff as well as the study coordination team. So the goals are to allocate roadway space appropriately for non-motorized users, transit, and single occupancy vehicles. The second goal is to maximize a return on any investment. And part of this gets at the promoting of redevelopment and infill development that would be transit supportive. And Jess will talk toward the end of the presentation about some ideas about how the land use and the development aspect will fit into the transportation solutions that would be recommended. This typical section is one example of the existing conditions along the corridor. We're going to look at the segment of Okeechobee Boulevard between State Road 7 and Jog Road as the example for each of the alternatives. I want to point out there are several other configurations of the typical section that the roadway passes through, but just for comparison purposes, we'll consistently look at the segment between State Road 7 and Jog. So currently this portion of the roadway has 8 travel lanes, 4 lanes in each direction. There are 5-foot bicycle lanes on road. 5-foot bicycle lanes were standard at the time that this section was constructed, but are no longer standard. They're considered substandard with FDOT's current bicycle facility standards. There's also a 6-foot sidewalk on both sides of the corridor. So now we'll get into some of the alternatives that we're considering for potentially modifying the roadway space to accommodate premium transit in the corridor. The first alternative is mixed traffic bus with limited stops. So this would be a limited stop bus service operating, as you might expect, in mixed traffic in the outside lane of the roadway. We could potentially reconfigure lane widths to achieve a 7-foot buffered bicycle lane in both directions. Another aspect that you're going to find consistent with all of the alternatives is reconstructing the sidewalk to be a 12-foot multimodal path. So that helps us to achieve goals related to allocating roadway space to safe facilities for the most vulnerable users. So that 12-foot multimodal path is going to be consistent in each one of the alternatives. The next alternative is called business access and transit lanes, or BAT lanes for short. The BA stands for business access, meaning that motorists could use the outside lane in order to execute right turns into driveways or onto side streets in locations that don't have dedicated right turn lane. But other than that, the outside lane would be available for preferential use by transit vehicles only. So vehicles making turns would be allowed to use it. But other than that, the bus would be having much fewer conflicts in the outside lane, which would allow the bus to operate at a faster travel speed. So as we go through these alternatives, you'll see that more and more of the evaluation criteria will go to a green check mark. The next alternative is called curbside dedicated lane bus rapid transit. This is the first of the alternatives that we call an exclusive guideway for transit, meaning that transit vehicles would have exclusive use of their lane. So this would be essentially creating a bus-only lane in the outside curb lane of the corridor. At this level of investment, we would expect that the roadway would be reconstructed in order to provide protected bicycle lanes. You see the separated bicycle lane there in the 10 feet of space. That would include a concrete separator between the bus lane and the bicycle lane. And of course, the multimodal path, as I mentioned, being consistent in all of these alternatives. The next one is a center platform dedicated bus rapid transit. So the dedicated bus guideway is now in the median of the roadway instead of on the outside of the roadway. Essentially, think of it as constructing a 2-lane road for buses in the median of Okeechobee Boulevard. Passenger access to the buses would also be provided in the median in this alternative. They would be accessed from existing signalized crosswalks that would now provide direct access onto a center platform station structure in the median. The next alternative is similar, but it's light rail transit instead of bus rapid transit. So this is one of 2 alternatives being considered that would actually introduce a new mode of transit, that being light rail transit. This would come with some additional administrative type costs because new maintenance and storage facilities would need to be introduced because there currently is no operator of light rail transit in Palm Beach County. I also want to point out when it comes to our evaluation of the objectives for, on the left side, for minimized travel time and delay for all users, the dedicated lane transit alternatives do not get a green check mark because although they do minimize travel time for transit users, we are anticipating there would be about a 15 to 20% increase in travel time for motorists because of the designation of a dedicated lane specifically for transit that would reduce the amount of capacity available for motorists. And then finally, the only alternative that gets a green check mark across the board is elevated grade separated light rail transit. Travel time is minimized for all users because the transit corridor is separated from the roadway, allowing the capacity of the roadway to remain unchanged. However, this, as you might imagine, comes with the highest level of cost. So as a summary of where we are currently on the evaluation of alternatives, this table summarizes several key factors, including how many of the goals and objectives have been achieved by each one of the alternatives. It also looks at the travel time for the transit service, ranging from 51 minutes in the no build condition to approximately 27 minutes in the elevated grade separated light rail transit, that one being where the transit service is completely separated from the roadway. For the at-grade alternatives, such as the dedicated lane light rail transit and bus rapid transit, the travel time is approximately somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 minutes. By comparison, typical car speeds along this route from Wellington Mall to downtown West Palm Beach range between about 25 to 35 minutes, depending on the level of congestion in the roadway. So just making that as a point of comparison as you're looking at the travel times. The estimated weekday ridership comes from a Federal Transit Administration or FTA model called the STOPS model. This model takes into account local demographic data in the approved travel demand model for the 2045 LRTP, as well as inherent data from existing transit systems from around the country. The ridership ranges from approximately 3,000 at the lowest level, that being the mixed traffic bus with limited stops, up to approximately 8,000 to 10,000 on the grade separated light rail transit. There are 2 cost factors to consider: operating and maintenance and capital. The operating and maintenance costs range from approximately $4 million to $16 million. So the operations and maintenance costs are about 4 times higher for the most robust alternative compared to the least robust alternative. But an even greater distinction can be made on the capital side, where The elevated grade separated light rail transit is actually about 25 times more expensive than the least robust of the alternatives, the mixed traffic bus. It's very likely on investments like this that federal grants would be pursued. Those are very competitive grants from FTA that require an extensive process. Typically, the timing on something like an elevated rail system is 15 plus years for implementation, whereas on a mixed traffic bus system, it's more in the neighborhood of about 5 years or so, especially with the roadway improvements that would need to be implemented to complement the bus service, such as enhanced stations and the multimodal pathway along the roadway. And then finally, for me, this is the list of stations that were used to develop the ridership numbers as well as our cost numbers. There are 17 stations spread across the 13.5-mile route. So approximately on average, a station about every 3/4 of a mile to 1 mile. And I'll turn it back over to Jess to wrap up.
So nice transition into the land use here. I wanted to just demonstrate, and I know I'm probably speaking to a group that knows this very well, that our infrastructure decisions do play with land use and have an impact there. So I'm just going to walk through kind of a 5-star, gold star standard in terms of a mixed use development. So here we have Meisner Park down in Boca. And here we have the upcoming new Brightline station. So here we just want to share that. And again, I know you all know this, that having walkable, safe facilities, accessing transit is very important in our land use development process. And also not only from the way we design things is that important, but we're also creating through our decisions and development potential increases in a tax base that provides funding back into our community. So here, Meisner, we have an example. Again, this is a very high standard in terms of how Meisner was developed, but we have a range of 48 million per acre in value down to just under 11 million per acre. And as a comparison, a Walmart built is around 890,000 per acre. So it really does make a difference how we develop, again, not only from the safety and accessibility standpoint, but from that taxable base that can be brought back into the community. So taking this example and kind of in a fictitious example, drop it into the State Road 7 and Okeechobee corridor. So Okeechobee is actually the roadway going north-south on this portrait. North is to the right here, and State Road 7 is at the top of the image there. So dropping Meisner into this area, this land is undeveloped right now. So it's $0 coming back into the community from a taxable standpoint. So as we look into the future, there is a mixed use overlay on this property, and it could potentially generate at a high level the 11 million per acre that you see here. So this is just a kind of exercise to show we're not suggesting Meisner be built here. A lot of work went into Meisner over a lot of time, but we just want to demonstrate again that you can create more value with your land, and with transit coming, we would hope that would occur. And in terms of next steps, we wanted to highlight that we are continuing with the technical tests that Stuart and I walked through today on the transit and roadway component, the health impact assessment, and also the land use component I just mentioned. In terms of upcoming meetings, we mostly wanted to highlight that we have our second of the 3 public workshops happening actually December 4th. This Saturday it's kicking off. I believe the team is going to be at a green market of sorts, getting the word out, and that'll be open for about a month. We're not having an in-person option this round. It's going to be all virtual. So we will be sharing links to that when it goes live with all of you. We encourage you to go on and fill out the survey and give us your opinions in addition to your opinions today. And then also just wanted to highlight that we will be looking to wrap up this study in March of 2022. So we'll be coming to you with an action item then. But again, today it's just information only. So with that, we will open it up for questions and comments. We appreciate your patience as we got through all of that information.
Margie, do we have any public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Anybody in the committee want to make, oh, Fadi, I'm sorry.
That shows the alternatives. The cost information.
The matrix table? Sure.
Yes. I think from this alternative, I mean, the last two, they're really pretty expensive. We're talking about 850 million and almost 2 billion. And I know typically you can get federal money, but this has to be competitive with project all over the US. And considering the size of the downtown and everything, I'm not sure if it's going to be very highly competitive among all the projects possible for, for this money. And also considering kind of potential ridership. So what's really feasible is, I would say, the first 5 items. Now, do nothing. We don't want to do that. I think I'm always in favor of improving. A lot of things can be improved on the corridor. But the first alternative is mixed traffic by improving, as we mentioned, signal priority, providing better access, providing higher frequency. This by far would be the best option because it really provides the most mobility. Option 3, 4, and 5, you're going to reduce the capacity of the road. You're taking one lane out and you're providing buses. Even if you have bus every 10 minutes, there is no way you're going to compensate for the capacity of the road. So in a way, you're going to create misery for the people who drive every day, which are 90% of the people, of 95%. So you force them to go and use transit. So even if you have one bus every 10 minutes and fully 100% ignore COVID, 100% filled, you're not going to have the capacity of one lane, which in urban areas is about 1,000 car per direction, which is about 1,200 persons. So basically, we're reducing capacity by spending a lot of money. So from us, again, from the traffic perspective, you're not adding capacity, you're reducing it. So we need to take this into consideration as we look into all of this option. As much as I enjoyed working on the TDP, which is very based on reasonable assumptions, we have serious problem with these assumptions here. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.
I have one thing
Oh,
for you. I'm
me?
not done.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So we're planning for the future. You look at this table, obviously the best travel times is the most expensive, but it's also transit is related to land use, as we all know. But we're not going to be built out to be Miami, downtown Miami right away. So, as we evolve through changes in land use, so should our transportation and our transportation needs. So thinking about the big picture of what is good now versus what is good 25, 50 years from now is really important, but making sure that we lay the groundwork today so that we don't plan out the future. If our future is a need for 27 minutes of travel time, then what can we do today to reserve that right of way to evolve to that potential elevated light rail system? Because I think ultimately, today we don't need it on this section, okay? But I don't know about you, but it took me a long time to get here. And it's because people are moving here, and it's because people don't want to be up north and they want to move to Florida. So population increases, land usage changes. My thought is that allowing the evolution of those changes by putting in the center platform dedicated lane with bus rapid transit in the middle can provide you with the future, then you already have the right of way. You put in your light rail after you do that. And we've talked about this. I mean, this isn't anything new. This is stuff they're teaching in college as well. But thinking about those things, we're planning for 5 years, we're planning for 50 years. So those are just my thoughts. So Yash, I see you're out there.
Yeah, I just had a quick comment. So something that you don't see necessarily in this table is the consideration for equity. There's also a lot of cost that comes with car ownership. There's fatality rates that can happen that are obviously higher with a car versus when you're in public transit. So when we think about, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, that's also something that should be considered, alongside the cost. So people can get a real picture. Because when you see a big number, obviously it looks like, oh, it takes 40 minutes to do this on a car. Why would I pay, all this money to do this 40 minutes again? But that's when you kind of have to look back into the other advantages too. Thank you.
Great feedback. Thank you.
All right, thank you for real.
Yes. Sorry, I got
Oh,
excited. Oh,
okay. All right, John.
So the numbers in here are for the entire corridor, correct? I know the cross sections you just gave one segment, which I'm sure that's not the most difficult segment to design. I would think, everything east of the turnpike is going to be your more challenging sections. So, but this is for the entire corridor, correct? Okay.
And John, we actually, thank you for bringing that point up. We did receive feedback to show an additional cross section or typical section in a more constrained area. So that is being added to the outreach
Right,
to
'cause
show that there's.
You got a
various-
lot more curb cuts,
Right.
Access to properties. And so, which goes back to Stephanie's comment about cross access and so forth. But there's a lot of challenges east of the turnpike that you may not have, west of the turnpike.
All right, thank you. And hope to hear all of your input in the survey and please share it with everyone you know. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple other items on here. I mean, it's past 12. No, it's 11:30. I mean, what is the board's desire at this point? Move on to the next items. Should we power through or are we good?
Are these going to be long items?
I'm sorry, what?
Are these long items or are they relatively short?
Honestly, we didn't get to these presentations yesterday, so
why
I
was
don't know.
asking.
I
You
told
guys
my
curtailed these
my
two
my
yesterday.
staff to talk fast if they do get to if you guys got to the presentations, but we can also defer them because they're not time sensitive.
Are they, their presentations by staff, so no consultant who's
Nope,
been
it's
waiting.
the first one's by Jason, the second one's by Greg, both of our staff members. So if you want to hear them, I can.
Jason, how long is your presentation?
I hear maybe till noon. Are we good till noon?
I
We're
have to
good
leave
till
now.
noon, then let's call it at noon, all right? Except for Bruce.
Okay, I'll note your absence, Bruce, and then so we'll pull up Jason's presentation.
Okay. All right, Jason, we're inviting you to speak on the 2021 annual listing of obligated projects.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to present to you guys today. So I'm going to go over the annual list of obligated projects, and this relates to the Transportation Improvement Program that I manage. And this is an annual event that we do for the TIP document. And before I get into it, I want to just define a few terms. So what we're talking about for the obligation report. And the first is just the document itself is the Transportation Improvement Program, and that's the intent to spend the money from the sources in the projects that are identified in the TIP document. So you'll see a project with phases with money allocated to them, and the document pretty much houses all those projects. The obligations is the commitment to reimburse up to the amount that's listed in the TIP document. And so the funds that you see are the funds that they have available to spend down on that particular project. So that's one way the money is kind of spent or drawn down from the amounts that you see in the TIP document. Another way is the deobligation, and that's when an applicant requests to reduce the amount of funds that they are provided for the project. When it gets closer to closeout, they may not need all of the funds, or it may have changed to where funds have been reduced. When you look at the obligation report or the summary that we provide, you'll notice that the FHW approved obligations doesn't match the tip amounts that are programmed in the document. And there is a couple of different reasons for that. And one of those reasons is FDOT swaps state and federal funds within a specific project. So you'll see a difference in funds because of where the money comes from. The other is Florida they oversubscribe to federal aid programs and then they get reimbursed at a later date. So those two examples are illustrated in the next couple of slides. So when you look at the summary of the obligated projects, you'll see kind of how the numbers correlate to each other. And this particular item, this particular project in the obligation report, you'll see that in the tip, they didn't request any funding for this particular project. However, they're able to obligate or get reimbursed almost 3.5 million, over 3.5 million. And that's because in previous tip documents, the project cost about 100 million that was programmed and that was used with state funds in previous years. And now they're submitting those expenses to FDOT to get or to FHWA or to federal government to get reimbursed. And that's why you see the reimbursement funds through the obligation report, but no indication of them requesting those funds. And that's because they requested them in previous years. And that's within this specific project. Here, you'll see a similar example to where the project was about 7.8 million was programmed in advanced construction funds and then in previous years, and then it gets reimbursed again with federal funds. So the state leverages their own state funding sources and applies that to projects on federal projects in advance of getting reimbursed for the project. To pretty much advanced projects or oversubscribed to the projects that they have available to construct to ensure that they get the maximum federal reimbursements for those projects. The tip is broken down into specific sections. And so here is just a kind of a breakdown of the amount that we see in each of those sections within the tip document, how much was spent within those categories, and then how much was deobligated or requested to withdraw down the amount that was requested in the tip. And the final column is just the funds remaining within those specific categories. So it's just a summary of the total amounts happening within the tip document. So overall, that's, in a nutshell, that's what the obligation summary report is. It's, this is kind of the balance sheet of showing you, these are the projects, this is the money people, applicants have requested, and this is how much funds have been spent down to construct the projects.
We got any questions, comments from the public?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any member comments? Great. Next item.
Thank you.
COVID-19 report. Greg Gabriel, got 16 minutes.
Good afternoon. So this is your last presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a strategic plan initiative from the TPA. The board has directed staff to conduct an evaluation of the impact of COVID on the transportation system in Palm Beach County. I know time have elapsed, and so this presentation is going to focus on the time that the study was done, not really things that happen onward. So I'll be covering the impact and trends for employment, traffic, safety, multimodal, and airport and seaport. When it comes to employment and trends, so employment level and basically is a good indicator and to assess your economic condition. So COVID shared basically similar trends under 2000 Great Recession. So when we look at employment matrices from the United States Bureau of Labor and Statistics, employment throughout the United States was impacted by COVID. And basically, we're looking at 1.2 million job loss as of April 2021. And in Palm Beach County, employment basically quadrupled between January and May of 2020. And in April of 2021, the number of employment workers in Palm Beach County declined by 35,000 from the peak of the recession, and basically went up to 100,000 by May. So basically the leisure industry, basically hospitality, they had suffered the greatest loss. 44,000 jobs were lost by March and April of 2020. And then when we look at for professional services, your businesses, education, and health services, those recover quicker because of teleworking condition that was possible. And FDOT did conduct an online survey where they asked close to 947 people participated. Of that number, 444 were college students, and they show favoritism to teleworking. And that's why you see some employers has some type of policy in place for teleworking right now. Traffic. Our consultant did pull data from Streetlight, and the nationwide VMT reduced at 40% at the beginning of the pandemic. And coming into this year, we saw a return to VMT within 12% from pre-pandemic level. And looking at the freeway volume, about more than 50% rebounded by September 2019. And also we observed increase in speeding. And you'll see the correlation with the speeding and the crash data that increasing in fatality from cyclists. Trip patterns also did change. We saw less trip occur during the peak hours. The reason for that was because of people were still moving, going to retail, pharmacy. So basically, we look at the Google mobility data and the Florida Department of Health data that showed that people were still moving. There was still a lot of cars, but it's just your trip pattern change. And then lastly, truck traffic did remain stable because of e-commerce, and also the I-95 Weigh in Motion station show consistency in truck activity from between 2019 and 2020 levels. Safety. So yes, there were less cars on the road, but we saw increase in ped bike crashes. The total crashes decreased up to 65% at the beginning of the pandemic, but total fatality and serious injury crash remain relatively unchanged. Pedestrian and bicycle fatalities for 2020 surpassed 2019 numbers. And as we know, the TPA is still working on Vision Zero and Complete Street to try to bring solution to these conditions of crashes, to lower crashes throughout the county. As far as multimodal and airport seaport trends, total ridership decreased for Tri-Rail by 80% and did recover to up to 55% pre-pandemic level by April 2021. But when it comes to Palm Train, they did decrease up to 45% in March and April of 2020. Service is still trying to recover. Service did recover a little bit in July, but there was a new variant that happened around that same time where they actually lost the increase in ridership that they did, the increased ridership they received in July, they lost it because of that new variant. We can explain that because we can explain the difference between Palm Train ridership and Tri-Rail because of the type of service they are. Palm Train, it's local, and Tri-Rail is more commuter service. So they basically serving two different type of commuters. And overall bicycle activity did increase. We saw that bike shop ran out of bikes and equipment. So there was more outdoor activities. So that was a plus, but also with that plus come some additional fatalities because there were more cyclists on the road. And airports and seaport, the PBI did saw a decrease of 70% in flights, but that quickly did recover as of April 2021. More people were flying in April compared to 2019. And as far as cruises, by the summer, most cruises had plans to start resuming services. And also we heard from the governor that he wasn't really trying to prevent cruises from happening, so to help the industry. So we do have some recommendation for you guys. So we divide those recommendations into 6 different categories: ongoing monitoring, resiliency, land use policy actions, bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvement, public transit efficiency improvements, and teleworking. And ongoing monitoring basically is really having a pulse on COVID. As we know, COVID is a moving target. We have to try to adjust as things happen and to make sure that we have quick response. Resiliency, so other agency like PBI, Palm Beach County has documents. So it's really working collaboratively with other departments to basically be more resilient as a county to fight this pandemic. As far as land use and policy, we basically try to promote the mixed use, more walking and biking in each of the designated downtown areas. Those we believe that it basically complement the downtown areas to have more TOD developments. Bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, basically it's almost similar to what we learned in the pandemic, and really capitalize on that, the new patterns, the outdoor activities, and see how can we repurpose some of the outdoor spaces and make it more enjoyable for people. So what we learned in the pandemic, and really create more infrastructure, whether it's a pop-up project, and complement the environment. Public transit and efficiency is really focusing on maintaining a high quality of service, whether it's reducing stops to make headways, improve on headways, and help our transit system. And I know we're trying to move to a new payment system. So all those improvement will help. And Palm Train is doing a great job, really staying in service, servicing the community, and all this good stuff. The last one is, actually not really the last one before last. No, it is. Take advantage of telecommunicating. As we know, we had all those hybrid meetings, and like I mentioned before, policy that support teleworking and putting those things in place. And that's my presentation.
Margie, do we have any public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
Committee comments? No? Okay. Well, thank you for everyone showing up. Our next meeting is February 3rd. So happy holidays and happy new year, everyone. And read the number 4 administrative items because we're not going to go over 'em. Thanks, everybody.